Chapter 469. Inferno Explosion was the most disgusting ability of Inferno demons. For adventurers, Inferno demons were probably the most annoying of all demons. After all, it was common for adventurers to work so hard to defeat a high-level Inferno demon, only to lose everything in the demon's maniacal laughter and flames. On the battlefield of order and chaos, the red figures who led the charge into enemy formations and laughed maniacally as they summoned meteor explosions and hellfire rain would always strike fear in the hearts of others. However, what left an even deeper impression in people's minds was that when they were forced to the brink, a single Inferno explosion would turn a strategic high ground into a deep pit, turn a town into ruins, and wipe out an entire army. All the heroes who surrounded them would die together with them. The most disgusting part was that it was very difficult for demons to completely die. If they self-destructed their incarnations or clones, although the power of the self-destruction would be small, the damage to their main body would be minimal. And even if they self-destructed their main body, as long as they had enough backup plans, the damage from the self-destruction wouldn't be fatal. They could even transfer their souls to their descendant. Even if they had to evolve from the very beginning, it wouldn't be difficult for them to grow with their previous accumulations and connections. Usually, even if they managed to kill off an Inferno demon, they would return to being a hero 300 or 400 years later. However, only a small portion of existences knew that Inferno demons wouldn't choose to self-destruct unless they had absolutely no other choice or had entered a state of insanity. That would be even greater than the loss of an incarnation. Self-destruction wasn't unique to Inferno demons. Elemental creatures, especially fire elemental creatures, were also hot. In fact, many mages loved to self-destruct. But out of all the self-destruction spells, Archmage's final attack was known to be the most destructive. After all, a mage's accumulated mana over many years wouldn't just detonate their life force, but also their souls that had gathered together with their mana. Inferno Demon's Inferno Explosion was roughly equal in power to Archmage's final attack. This was because Inferno Demons didn't only detonate their own life force, but also a mixture of fire element mana and chaos essence. This meant that even if Inferno Demons self-destructed their clones, they would definitely lose a portion of their chaos essence and lose power levels. The essence of the abyss was necessary for a demon to evolve. It was the best reward that the will of chaos gave to a demon. It was the purest form of chaos origin energy, as well as the source of energy for a demon that was equivalent to a true god's divine power. Losing the essence of the abyss was the same as wasting years of hard work and having to start all over again. In the mortal plane, if a god or god envoy's clone was killed, the loss would usually be negligible. The lost power could be recovered with time. However, if a high-level demon lost a power level, his subordinates and enemies would never miss such a good opportunity. That was why many Inferno demons would rather lose their clones than choose to self-destruct. Only in a factional battlefield, like the Holy War, would it be possible to see Inferno demons self-destruct on a large scale. Inferno demons would be a powerful weapon to break the strategic balance. The will of the Chaos Abyss would control the Inferno demons, and the Inferno demons wouldn't have any choice at all. It was only natural that they would be drained of all their remaining value. Perhaps even an army's destructive self-destruction wouldn't be as frightening as Ladvioka's self-destruction. Ladvioka was an elder demon main god who had experienced at least 2 holy wars. The mana and essence of the Chaos Abyss that he had accumulated was incalculable. If he exploded all of this in an instant, any so-called forbidden spell would be nothing more than a tiny spark in front of him. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to force an Inferno demon to the brink either. But the situation back then, with the collapsing apocalyptic beasts and the Inferno demons fighting to the death, it was impossible for Roland to hold back. Holding back would be the same as committing suicide. Ladvioka, the oldest Inferno demon king, unhesitatingly chose the fiercest counterattack. At that moment, when the entire mountain inferno exploded and Roland and the other two original sins entered the revival phase, the entire Hades trembled from that frightening explosion. And this was the result of Roland ignoring everything else and breaking through Ladvioka's defenses. He forcefully tore off an important part from a main god-level demon's body. If Ladvioka had successfully self-destructed, it would have been too late. That's half of the oldest Inferno demon's heart. And for demons, the heart is a special part. When Roland desperately tore off that half of the Lord of Putrefaction's heart, he hadn't done it to reduce the power of the Lord of Putrefaction's self-destruction. That was because the Lord of Putrefaction's self-destruction would definitely send him back to the Pillar of Law to be revived. Roland had done it for the last time. He saw the beautiful figure standing in front of the pillar of ice by herself. Roland was no longer able to deliver his present to her, which was why he called out to a name that everyone had already forgotten. He hoped that Roland would be able to help him, even if they were already enemies. And before Ladvioka's incomplete body was reduced to ashes in the explosion, Roland gave his final blessing as he looked at the figure in the snow. Live on Eliza. Her long silver hair fluttered in the wind. Beneath her gold-rimmed spectacles was her usual expressionless face. It was just that Eliza wasn't in a good state right now. Her black and white lace dress was filled with sword slashes, and she couldn't stop the blood from flowing out of her mouth. The wound on her right arm was still hanging limply, and it was evident that she had lost all feeling in it. And this was only the result of Cavendish holding back with his sword. There's actually such a huge difference between us. Her vision was now hazy. Her physical injuries were only a part of it. What was injured was her very source. Demon Marchioness hadn't even been able to use her combat form before she was seriously injured by the Abyss Prince's sword attack. Even though she still had the will to fight to the end, the tremendous difference in power level made the so-called will to fight meaningless. At that moment, she even considered using an Inferno explosion. But the next instant she discovered that Cavendish had actually sealed off even this possibility. That's right, Ladvioka wasn't the only Inferno demon in the entire Hades plane. As the Fire Sea Marchioness, Eliza had successfully evolved by absorbing the Fire Elemental God's power level. Naturally, she was an Inferno demon that was the result of combining the essence of the Chaos Abyss and Fire Element magic. But even though the current Eliza was already powerful enough, the difference between the two of them was far too great. One was a demon Marchioness who had instantly become a demon Marchioness, while the other was a favored child of the Chaos Abyss, an existence with the highest power level in the world. If it wasn't for the fact that Roland had gone easy on her, Eliza probably would have already died. Cavendish continued to smile as he continued forward. However, Eliza blocked his way once again. Her eyes were still cold and rational, but they represented the complete desire for battle. Sister-in-law, just obediently lie down on the ground. Don't make things difficult for me. I'm doing something important right now. Besides, if I really kill you, my older brother will probably go all out against me. Carwins awkwardly scratched his head. However, he suddenly smiled in delight, as if he had recalled something interesting. The Abyss Prince smiled as innocently as a child. He seemed to be a little shy, a little troubled, and also a little excited. Then won't I be able to see my older brother seriously taking revenge on me? Now that I think about it, I'm really looking forward to it. Don't tempt me into killing you. Cavendish slowly extended his finger with an unknown frightening pressure. At this moment, he mysteriously became serious. This sudden thought bloomed in his chaotic mind. His powerful curiosity and anticipation drove him to take action. He actually really wanted to see what Roland would do after he killed Eliza. Perhaps the unknown itself was the most interesting thing to Roland. If you die, he'll probably go all out against me. He'll probably swing his sword at me with a belly full of hatred and regret. Perhaps just this reason alone is enough for me to kill you right now. Roland's calm words seemed to have already sentenced Eliza to death. But even so, Eliza continued to coldly look at him. She had no intention of moving out of his way at all, as if she was someone else who was about to die. My little lover, don't forget our goal. It's not a good habit to cause unnecessary trouble, however. The King of Temptations suddenly walked out and used a gentle embrace to stop Cavendish's killing intent towards Eliza. Besides, we have a new guest now. Don't let him laugh at us. The Devil Lord Carwins looked at the nearby tower of ice. There, an existence that couldn't be ignored was currently paying attention to this place. Before Carwins even finished speaking, a blue figure suddenly appeared above everyone's heads. This figure was quite large and wore an exquisite crown on his head. His upper body was as muscular as a Hercules, while his lower body was a colorful fishtail. His facial features were quite handsome, but he had a bitter expression. His blue eyes were filled with sorrow, as if he had just met the most tragic fate in the world. Even though he was clearly standing there, he seemed to exist between reality and illusion, making it difficult for anyone to grasp his exact location. The Devil Lord Carwins lowered his head and held a crimson-red stone in his hand. This stone was constantly beating as if it was a living heart. That's right, this was the gift that Roland had entrusted to Carwins, the Inferno Demon's heart. Inferno demons were immune to fire damage. Hearts were the source of demons' power. Naturally, they would also be immune to the same type of damage. After that explosion that destroyed everything, this half of the Inferno Demon's heart that had been torn off was the only thing left behind from that astonishing explosion. The Devil Lord Carwins simply used his back to protect Eliza. He handed the stone, the half of the Inferno Demon's heart that Roland had torn off from the Lord of Putrefaction, to Eliza, who had a surprised expression. That person wanted me to give this to you. Originally, I didn't intend to help him. After all, even if he revived me, he forced my little mermaid to die. I still intended to settle the score with him. But seeing how stubborn you are, I feel as if I'm looking at my equally stubborn little mermaid. That's why I'm helping you, not helping that heartless bastard. When the Blue Devil Lord Carwins turned around, his sorrowful eyes seemed as if he was mourning the death of all living things in the world. The next instant, all of his fighting spirit transformed into pure killing intent. This was divine might that was as fierce as a tsunami. This was pure power that caused all living things to mourn. A main god level true god? Cavendish was rather astonished. He had no recollection of such a person. A main god that suddenly appeared would definitely be more than enough to easily break the balance of the battlefield. It was impossible to ignore such an existence from the very start. However, Ilmigia sucked in a breath of cold air. This Devil Lord, who also had a long history, recognized this main god. Stonevilla? The ancient sea god Stonevilla. How could you possibly still be alive? You should have died long ago. Chapter 470. The ancient sea god Stonevilla, the husband of the water elemental goddess Alos, was rumored to have challenged the goddess of order's authority in ancient times, and was the strongest main god back then. The term strongest was always a bit vague, but back in the day, there were multiple main gods in the sea god system with him as the core. His power was enough to challenge the goddess of order's authority. And unlike later generations, where people believed in gods, the ancient gods all relied on their own power to reach where they were. They were incredibly powerful, and Roland was able to make multiple main gods listen to his commands. Even Lady Storm was once his subordinate, and he even tried to make the goddess of order a figurehead. This doubtlessly meant that Roland and his faction were incredibly powerful, and it was rumored that it was precisely because of his inconceivably powerful strength that he was abnormally arrogant, which led to his destruction. And when he was in trouble, apart from his wife, almost all of his subordinates not only didn't help him, they even took advantage of him in the end. Even with the enticement and secret manipulation from both major factions, it was still rare for someone to fail to such an extent. But no matter how much the legends and history belittled Roland's personality, they all described him as incredibly powerful. Perhaps I can make use of this power. Unlike most people who almost instinctively worship the strong, for Roland, individual power wasn't enough to win his respect. On the contrary, the personality flaws that were revealed due to being powerful would instead become the best weakness for him to take advantage of. Although most love isn't equal, I'm truly touched that Alos is so deeply in love. Perhaps I now have a good hostage. Yep, in a way, Roland had already maxed out his villainous talents of being a mastermind behind the scenes, coercion and bribery, and hostage-taking and extortion. His initial desire to be a good person seemed to have been destined to go astray from the very beginning. By the way, if it wasn't for the fact that he always mysteriously became a villain, he wouldn't have wanted to become a good person. From a certain point of view, personality determined one's fate. Roland definitely hadn't gotten to where he was today by luck. He was a natural-born villain. Eliza, don't listen to this guy's nonsense. He has to protect the Pillar of Ice, more than anyone else. Even if he falls again, he won't give up on the Pillar of Ice. Regenerating a Hades-level physical body wasn't an easy task. At this time, Roland was unable to move, but his will passed words of comfort to Eliza, with merciless disdain and displeasure. And he was speaking the truth. Since he knew from the very beginning that Stonevilla would revive because of the artifact and soul he had left behind, how could he, who lacked combat power, not take him into account? From a certain standpoint, I had indeed gone overboard. I had made a deal with Alos, using my own death as the price for Sidenwar's revival. And now, I had created a special situation that forced Sidenwar to become my fighter. If I wanted to wait for the day that Alos revived, I would have to protect the Pillar of Ice. Yes, the Pillar of Ice and the revival of Alos. At this time, Roland's arrangement was very obvious. The 4 elemental pillars were the elemental thrones of the elemental plane. As the controllers and regulators of elemental power, there would naturally be elemental gods. And in the plane of Hades, there were the 4 pillar gods of Hades that Roland had repeatedly emphasized. And it wasn't easy to reach this standard. As an existence that controlled the basic concept of Hades, the minimum requirement was that he had to have once stepped into the realm of the gods, and then he had to conform to the definition of the element itself. Most importantly, he had to be dead. Yes, he had to be a dead god or a mortal with an incomplete soul to become one of the 4 pillar gods of Hades. This wasn't forcing people, but the most basic rule of death in Hades. Just like how the elemental gods of the elemental plane had to be elemental creatures, the only ones who could become the god of Hades were naturally the remnant souls of the dead. In Roland's grand plan, the dead souls would use the soul ice crystal as a temporary carrier, completely assimilating with the extreme rules of the plane of Hades, and finally resurrecting as the 4 pillar gods, becoming the immortal gods of Hades. And, as the price of resurrection, they were also destined to stay in Hades forever. And this seemingly simple requirement was actually very difficult to achieve. There was no god of ice in this world, and the only one that was related to it was the goddess of frost, an evil god of chaos. She was the incarnation of a blizzard, and her hobby was to freeze travelers who walked alone on the snowy mountains. She was as notorious as Lady Storm, a crazy woman. All frigid Maw members with suitable attributes and power were soul creatures, and their abilities completely met the requirements. But as special existences that were souls, they didn't have the concept of death. Once they were injured too much, they would naturally dissipate and return to the snowy mountains, unable to be used at all. In the end, between killing the goddess of frost or using Alos, who had similar attributes, Roland chose the goddess of water elemental. After all, the god of elements and the pillar gods of Hades had many similarities, and the power of life represented by the water element had something in common with the life of ice. On the other hand, anyone who was mysteriously killed would have a grudge. If the goddess of frost still chose to take revenge and rebel after becoming one of the 4 pillars of Hades, then it would be very interesting. For the sake of Alos's remnant soul, I must force her to death. That was why there was that trade of a life for a life. And the development of the situation also proved that Roland's choice was correct, which made him heave a sigh of relief. And this was actually the easiest condition to achieve among the 4 pillar gods from the very start. The Law faction didn't have any other options. Only Womians had relied on the power of law to become a god. And it was precisely this condition that made the appearance of the Law god the most basic prerequisite for the grand plan. It was also precisely because Roland had successfully helped Womians ascend to godhood that Ael had made up his mind. Perfecting the concept of law, spreading the faith of law, sacrificing soul shards to create a divine body, and thinking of ways to help Womians obtain even more divine concepts and divine power. Probably only Roland himself knew about the difficulties and schemes he had gone through. As the most basic law of the Hades was judgment and death, the law god and death god had to be incredibly powerful. That was why Ael had spared no expense in the past 2 years to forcefully support Womians to the level of a powerful god. And as the only death god in the world, Ael was also duty-bound to do so. Of course, it was unknown when the pillar gods of the Hades would awaken. No, it should be said that nobody could guarantee that they would truly be able to awaken and revive. After all, even the forbidden spell that created the Hades was based on theory. The success rate was incalculably low from the very start, and nobody knew what would happen. And even if they were lucky enough to awaken, they would only be able to remain in the Hades forever. The losses and limitations would be far too great. The success rate of creating the Hades won't exceed 50%, and the success rate of reviving the pillar gods of the Hades won't exceed 50% either. You're asking me how I calculated it? Since it's either success or failure, of course it's 50%. I'm being serious. When I said this, I've already done my best and tried my best to increase the success rate. However, there are still far too many unknowns, and it's impossible to calculate the success rate. But the more we do, the more conditions we have, and the higher the success rate will naturally be. Man proposes, God disposes. That was probably the case. Roland had always told the truth, even if the truth didn't seem like a good one. The gods of Ael's faction naturally didn't wish for their boss, the strongest main god, to meet such a fate. They had also considered replacing him with a divine concept related to death, such as destruction, Armageddon, guardian of the dead, and so on. Some true gods volunteered to replace him, but Ael rejected them. Yep, so it was possible for Ael to survive. Even if he personally cut off the cycle of reincarnation and the river Styx, as long as he was willing to reduce the degree of change and reduce the impact, such as temporarily taking on another divine concept, it was indeed possible for him to survive, even if it meant that he would suffer great losses. However, he still chose to transform himself into the pillar of death god of the Hades. Why? It was simply to increase the success rate of creating the Hades. Only Ael was capable of providing the purest power of death. And in order to further increase the success rate, Ael had even handed over his own skeleton. That was his backup plan in case he died. If Ael failed this time, his body and soul would be destined to be destroyed. For the sake of the Hades and the grand scheme, Ael has gambled everything. Not only did he hand over his own eternity, he also handed over his trust. He believes that even if he's not here anymore, we can still complete the grand scheme. We can't disappoint Boss Ael. As a leader, Ael didn't say anything grand that would make others sacrifice themselves. Instead, he used his own eternity as the price to choose the plan with the highest success rate. This was also the foundational reason why Roland, who had always been proud and arrogant, would sometimes half-jokingly and half-seriously call Ael boss. As for the final Tower of Holy Light, while it seemed like there were many powerful individuals of the Holy Light, there were actually 0 existences that met the requirement. As previously mentioned, Holy Light job class members' growth was quite a shortcut. Those who reached the level of a god were actually all using the god of Holy Light's gift. Holy Light, please bestow me with power. Although it seemed quite convenient to obtain power through prayers that fit the Holy Light's teachings, from a different perspective, this meant that the powerful individuals of the Holy Light were actually nothing more than the God of Holy Light's servants. They weren't independent existences at all. How could such powerful individuals of the Holy Light possibly become the pillar of Holy Light that represented salvation? The Holy Light must be saved. That's why Estrada must die. That letter containing the soul ice crystal forced Estrada to choose death. However, Estrada smiled and calmly faced death when faced with the unreasonable requests of his favorite disciple. He even completed those harsh requests. Before his death, Estrada reinterpreted and redefined the Holy Light. Although he was deprived of the power of Holy Light, he relied on his own power to re-enter the level of a god and become a completely independent Holy Light individual. And so, the final requirement was fulfilled. Now, countless sacrifices were made in exchange for the establishment of the Hades. The remnant souls of the 3 pillar gods were all in a deep slumber within the pillar of Hades. When they woke up, the invaders of the Hades would face true rulers of the Hades. Of course, Womians should have entered a deep slumber as well. However, the sly Roland managed to sneak in again by merging his 2 souls into one. Of course, this Womian's Roland wasn't the complete pillar god. Just how powerful would the complete pillar god be? Since there was no precedent, it was impossible to calculate exactly how powerful they would be. However, as the rulers of the Hades, as the rulers of one of the 4 major rules of the world, it was highly likely that they would be at the level of a main god. Once they woke up, they would naturally change the entire situation. The main reason why Roland chose the strategy of delaying time was to wait for the pillar gods to wake up. Forcing the entire incomplete Hades to start operating would also provide the pillar gods with power and nourishment, urging them to wake up as soon as possible. The pillar gods were the strongest weapons of the Hades. However, they were also their only weakness. Naturally, these were the top secrets of the Hades. Unfortunately, due to a spy, all of these secrets were leaked to Cavendish. Fortunately, Roland, who was used to acting in a mysterious way, would only tell his colleagues half of the story. Even if Cavendish knew that Alos's remnant soul was in the Pillar of Ice, it was impossible for him to know that Stonevilla was about to be resurrected. Obviously, the sea god had sensed the resurrection of Stonevilla, but he had remained silent. Obviously, he didn't want to become Roland's volunteer fighter. However, since his wife had become one of the pillar gods of the Hades, unless he hardened his heart and left his wife, he had already been tied to the pirate ship from the beginning. His disappearance and silence were a form of resistance and dissatisfaction. However, in front of a senior villain who held a hostage, it was meaningless. Roland's words dissolved his uncooperative attitude. Once the pillar of God's soul is destroyed, even if the Hades are lucky to survive, the pillar gods in it will definitely be finished. We won't have another chance to use the 4 elements to create the world. When this sentence lingered in the sky above the Pillar of Ice, Stonevilla, who had disappeared without a trace, suddenly appeared. If Eliza dies, Alos, I don't have a girlfriend, so don't expect to have a wife. Thus, Stonevilla, who had originally planned to watch Eliza die, made his move. Sidenwar's words were a blatant threat. If anyone dared to say such a thing back when he was at his peak, Sidenwar would have long since killed them. But now, Sidenwar could only obediently go into battle and become Sidenwar's fighter. As for those Sundra retorts and opening lines, we can forgive him. As an ancient big shot, he still needed face, and his lines still had to be a little fierce. Look, I went into battle on my own. Yes, at least he couldn't let others see that he was forced to go into battle as a fighter. As for whether Roland was worried about the other party's revenge, Offend him? What's there to be afraid of? His wife is in my hands, and he'll be my employee for the rest of his life. Roland probably wouldn't be able to accomplish his goal in this lifetime of successfully clearing his name and becoming a good person. This style made him seem like an evil villain, and the worst kind of kidnapper. Currently, Stonevilla was in his strongest state. Even without that bastard's threat, Alos's remnant soul was right behind him in the Tower of Ice, so there was no way for him to retreat. So, don't worry. Let that employee be your meat shield. Since you want to become stronger, then accept my gift. When all the information entered Eliza's mind, while she was angry that Roland had hidden so many things from her and was such a bastard, the expressionless Eliza was actually quite delighted. At the very least, he remembers my abilities. This is probably the first gift he's giving me. All right then, from a certain standpoint, Eliza's path of love was so difficult and low in requirements that others would cry. But right now, Roland had indeed given Eliza a gift that was most suitable for her. That main god-level Inferno Demon's heart was now in the hands of the Inferno Demon Queen, who was also a main god-level Inferno Demon. All the conditions had been met, and it was as if fate had returned. The scene at Sulphur Mountain City was about to repeat itself, and a new demon evolution record was about to be created. Awaken, my soul imprint, Marauder. Chapter 471. Awaken, Marauder. A commanding whisper awakened the flame sea Marchioness' hidden power. The next instant, Ladvioka's marked heart began to shatter and transform into fire crystals that were directly absorbed by Eliza. Marauder was Eliza's soul imprint, as well as her stepping stone to the heavens. Elisa's soul brand was very special. In the past, the soul brand of the two beasts would always fall into a deep slumber. It didn't even have any effect on her. But at this moment, in the depths of her soul, a dragon head dripping with blood was tearing at the black beast. The two beasts were frantically fighting for their lives. But at this moment, they were fighting over half a heart that was dripping with blood. Soul imprints were the true understanding of one's own life. Everyone's path was different, so naturally there would be thousands of different soul imprints. However, the most common soul imprint was a summary and understanding of one's previous job class. Usually, the effect would be to strengthen one's abilities in a certain area. Although it seemed simple, it was an actual improvement. Many of my soul imprints were like this. The reason why I said it was, usually, was because this was only the most common situation. However, there would always be a group of people who didn't take the normal path. Simple buff soul imprints were simple and practical, but they were unable to change one's foundation. Some people's soul imprints could directly change a person's fighting style and power composition. There were already many examples of people reaching the heavens in a single step. Unlimited courage imprint would become stronger as long as one believed that they wouldn't lose. This allowed Cavendish to never fear powerful enemies. He was basically a hot-blooded main character. A certain beast tamers, loved to protect, allowed him to obtain countless subordinates. He was basically the main character of a legendary story. Diana's anti-god fool was unprecedented in history. She directly created a new job class and an entire generation. She even pointed her sword directly at the true gods. She was basically the main character of a legendary story. Alright then, I admit that I was quite resentful. Compared to them, my soul imprint only had a simple buff effect. It was indeed a common item. However, Eliza's soul imprint was the most unique of all. It was impossible to use normally and had no buffs or buff. However, it gave her a chance to reach the heavens in a single step. It could be said that this was a miracle created by Eliza's determination to become stronger. My soul confirms that I should follow my instincts and pursue my dreams. Thanks to the blessing of the goddess of chaos, all demons had the ability to devour and evolve. However, there was a limit to how much they could devour and evolve. Advancing one rank would be a great supplement, and 2 ranks would be enough for them to die. Any higher and they would self-destruct. Eliza's soul imprint was obviously a reflection of her demonic bloodline, but it had the possibility of reaching the heavens in a single step. The Marauder's soul imprint's effects were ridiculously powerful. As long as it was something that she desired, as long as it met her elemental requirements, she would be able to devour it to evolve. Back in the day, she had devoured the fire elemental god and demon count, which corresponded to the elements of fire and demon. And now, she had devoured Ladvioka's heart, which also corresponded to the elements of fire and demon. This was completely in line with Eliza's needs. This was the perfect gift for her. A demon's heart was the best magic potion ingredient. It was also the energy source for many special machines. In fact, it was even a hard currency in the lower planes. That was because they were the crystallization of a demon's lifetime of power. Devouring and evolving were the eternal themes of the Chaos Abyss. Eliza, who was favored by the Chaos Abyss, was the embodiment of this theme. Elisa's heart was instantly disintegrated. When crimson flames covered Elisa, the next instant, Elisa transformed into a fiery phantom that spread her wings and soared into the sky. The newborn Inferno demon immediately flew towards Ilmigia. A newborn demon king would need to use battle to exhaust and improve her power. Since the two main gods were already competing against each other, the Queen of Temptations was naturally the only choice. "You're always walking around naked. I've long since disliked you." "All right then," Ilmigia's angry roar was filled with undisguised personal resentment. It seemed that she had another reason for choosing the Queen of Temptations as her opponent. "Hee, of course I have to show off my good figure. You're probably angry that your man always sneaks glances at me, aren't you?" As Ilmigia giggled, she even proudly winked at Roland. But then, she was unable to smile anymore, as the fire shadow tossed out a flame spear that instantly covered the entire sky, forcefully sending Ilmigia back to the ground as she had just flown up. Cough, cough, using energy in such a crude manner is such a waste. Ilmigia, who was covered in dust, wasn't injured at all. Even though she was the weakest of the Devil Lords, she was still an ancient powerful individual who had survived for countless years. Eliza's overly scattered flame energy wasn't even able to pierce through Ilmigia's defenses. Ilmigia didn't even get to finish complaining as several dozen flame spears in the sky caused her to completely shut up. Not only was the energy released by Ilmigia like a nouveau riche, there was also something faintly within those flame spears that made Ilmigia instinctively feel threatened. Hiding a fatal attack in a seemingly harmless large-scale Yoi spell. Such a simple tactic. All right then, Ilmigia, who was used to using useless words to disturb her opponents, completely shut up this time. She didn't even dare to come into contact with the green smoke coming from the flame spears. "Ladvioka's true essence of the Chaos Abyss? You're quite generous." The true essence of the Chaos Abyss was a gift from the Chaos Abyss. It was the core of chaos, the accumulation of a demon's entire life. It was also a necessary item for a demon to improve themselves. When the true essence of the Chaos Abyss was used as a one-time use item to attack, it was basically the equivalent of directly detonating a nuclear reactor. The seemingly light green smoke was actually a fatal threat. Even Ilmigia didn't dare to come into contact with it. Eliza didn't respond. She simply reflexively spread out the faint green smoke. This time, not only was Ilmigia trying to hide, even the two main gods on the battlefield reflexively moved away from the poison mist. The flames and poison mist transformed the snow-white battlefield into a dangerous domain. Eliza was willing to pay any price to throw herself into this battle, which made things rather difficult for the Queen of Temptations, who wasn't used to direct combat. She tried to avoid the poison mist and use a battle of attrition to weaken Ladvioka. However, the Queen of Temptations didn't know that this seemingly important power was actually useless against Eliza. Just like how Ladvioka was able to split his attention between two major domains, the King of Putrefaction's true essence of the Chaos Abyss was actually split into two major parts. One part was the power of putrefaction, while the other part was the Inferno Demon's true essence. The latter was naturally nourishment for Eliza, while the former was obviously impossible to digest, so it was better to use it as a one-time use item. Currently, Eliza's entire body was spewing flames. She casually tossed out endless fire seas and fire spears that resembled forbidden spells, but that wasn't a good thing either. She was no longer able to control her ever-increasing power, and needed to vent it through battle. Of course, the most important thing for her to do right now was to find a place to properly digest and organize her power. However, that was obviously impossible right now. That was why Ilmigia changed her way of thinking. She decided to toss out the impurities and uncontrollable power in her body as a consumable item. This was no different from burning one's soul to create an endless amount of firepower. Plus, Ilmigia had plenty of misgivings, so she actually gained the upper hand. Compared to the rather gentle battle between the two main gods, the battle between the main gods was far crueler and more direct. Chapter 472. When talking about the sea gods, ordinary people would always think of the current sea god, Osweir. Even though the surface area of the ocean in Aichi wasn't several times larger than the surface area of the land, the ruler of the ocean, whose surface area was almost equal to the surface area of the land, still made people respect him. Osweir rarely appeared in public. It was rumored that he had many incarnations. When he was in a good mood, a beautiful petrel would bring a lost ship out of a dead end. When he was in a bad mood, an abnormally large seabed octopus would cause an entire island to fall silent. Lady Storm was only able to control the areas around the coastline and the sea tribes that used to be part of the land's water tribes. Osweir actually controlled the same amount of territory as all the land species. However, he used a method of governing by doing nothing. Although there were many legends about him, there was actually very little reliable information. The fact that he was able to stay out of multiple holy wars and ignore the requests of both major factions was already a testament to his strength. I learned from the ancient gods that the depths of the ocean were a completely different world. There were still various deep-sea sea tribes and sea gods there. Their civilizations had already broken away from the mainland. As for the mysterious and powerful Osweir, even the previous sea god, who was in the same generation as his grandfather, was once a subordinate of the ancient sea god Stonevilla. It was rumored that they were even relatives. It was likely that in terms of seniority and past glory, none of the current main gods could compare to Stonevilla. Clang. The trident that was formed from ice water suddenly knocked against the ground, causing large amounts of ice and snow to melt into ice water. Meanwhile, the pillar of ice seemed to adjust its color as if responding to the trident. The frosty white radiance now had a tinge of blue, and the snow that was constantly falling from the sky transformed into an icy torrential rain. At Stonevilla's level, changing the natural environment around him was only a side effect. Something even stranger happened next. Many strange water creatures suddenly appeared in the heavy rain. There were dolphins, whales, seals, whales, and so on. Even rarer deep-sea monsters suddenly appeared in large numbers. The grayish-black sky that was commonly seen in the Inferno was now dyed blue. Mysterious ripples appeared in the sky, as if the entire world had been transformed into an ocean. Ocean. There was no need for additional eulogies. Just a few words were enough to change the entire world. If a soul world was a miracle that could distort the normal world, then at Stonevilla's level, it would be I am the world. His personal domain began to expand, and an endless ocean appeared in the surroundings. As the reinforcement of the Hades, he received more help than that. One of the four pillars, the Tower of Ice, had granted him unlimited support authority. The entire world was painted blue, and the terrain was also rewritten. The mountain range had actually turned into a pool with a narrow bottom and wide top. Large amounts of rainwater kept falling, and even Cavendish's knees were submerged by the sudden rise in the water. The trident made of water was swung horizontally again, and the water that had just accumulated turned into the shapes of beasts, dolphins, sharks, and the sea beasts in the air combined with the water beasts, turning into solid objects. A shark-like water beast that was no more than 2 meters long appeared in midair, but it had the auras of bloodthirst, fanaticism, venomous fangs, and so on. It was basically like a super support priest. And a whale-shaped water beast that seemed small and exquisite suddenly opened its large mouth and emitted a soundless sound wave that caused the entire domain to tremble. This sound wave was an attack that directly targeted the soul. These temporarily constructed water beasts displayed power levels that far surpassed any so-called powerful individual. It was as if the ancient sea tribe's powerful individuals had borrowed a corpse to be reborn. A combination of soul possession and creation? No, this is simply the materialization of memories. How could Stonevilla, who had revived by himself, possibly have the souls of other powerful individuals? This was merely the reappearance of the sea beasts and sea tribes' powerful individuals in his memories. And he was able to recreate the combat prowess of an ancient existence just by relying on his personal memories and knowledge. This was far beyond the comprehension of any modern powerful individual. But after his initial astonishment, Cavendish shrugged and yawned, as if he wasn't very excited. I originally heard of your reputation and thought that you'd have a lot of tricks up your sleeves. It seems that you're not even a main god anymore. The moment that he said this, Stonevilla paused and then fiercely waved his trident. Even more sea beasts appeared in response to his summons, and all of them suddenly pounced on Stonevilla. An all-out battle immediately began, and for an ancient sea god who was used to looking down on other existences, telling a lie would be an insult to himself. His silence was a tacit admission. That's right, not only was Stonevilla not a main god, strictly speaking, he was barely even a powerful god. The backup plan that he left behind before his death was indeed effective. Even though he died, Stonevilla's ocean bottle preserved his divine soul, and under the guidance of the system, Lady Storm's large amount of sea divine power became nourishment for his divine soul to recover. However, Lady Storm herself was a powerful divine power that had been quickly developed. After changing hands twice and changing elemental attributes, it was already extremely fortunate that only 1/3 of her divine power remained. In the end, the divine power that was given to Stonevilla was only enough to allow his divine soul to move slightly. Originally, the system's quest had a continuation, such as hunting sea beasts, searching for the sea god's divine blood, and so on to restore his physical body so that he could be more perfectly resurrected. But now, there was obviously no time for that. The physical body that Stonevilla was currently using was temporarily given to him by the Tower of Ice, which was completely different from his prime. The reason that he could move and even fight was because he was a champion who had leveled up by himself. If he was a rookie who had become a god through faith, his divine power would not be enough to support his divine soul, and he would directly end up in eternal slumber. And if he still had any priesthood, it would be fine. His original priesthoods such as Ocean, King of Sea Beasts, the sole ruler of the seas, and so on had all been divided up by others. Now, he had no priesthood, no believers, no territory, and yet he was a god who possessed a certain amount of divine power. He completely fit the definition of an evil god. Evil god Stonevilla, how pitiful! Cavendish really touched on Stonevilla's sore spot. He dealt with those sea beasts with ease, and even his longsword was still in its scabbard. With a casual strike, he easily shattered those water blocks. Carwins had a very clear understanding of the situation. If Sidenwar was still at his peak, he would have brought down his trident a long time ago, and he would have directly clashed with Carwins. There would have been no need for him to play these seemingly beautiful tricks that were actually not lethal at all. But judging from how Stonevilla's expression kept worsening, Cavendish had indeed hit a sore spot. Gods were existences with concepts. Divine concepts and teachings would be the chains that bound them, but they would also explain how they existed and spread their concepts. And now that all of Stonevilla's divine concepts had been divided up, he didn't even have a concept of his own. He was now an evil god without any foundational foundation. If it wasn't for the fact that he was strong enough, he would have already begun to naturally dissipate. It would have been fine if he still had a physical body, but the current Stonevilla was the perfect example of how a tiger would be bullied by a dog. All revived ancient gods would face such a difficult situation. They would often hide in the mortal plane and develop their own churches and believers, stealing other gods' divine concepts, and so on. Unfortunately, Stonevilla didn't have the time to do this. He was dragged onto the battlefield. Arrogant young man, the ancient god was angrily roaring, but the new main god who had just ascended to the throne didn't care at all. Instead, he scratched his head in boredom, feeling like this was a waste of time. But suddenly, a voice echoed throughout the battlefield. Fine, I admit that I had used a clone to take advantage of the situation. How about it, God of the River Styx? Ael's departure had created an opening for me. However, I didn't have the ability to confer the title of God of the River Styx. The River Styx that I was referring to was the River of Souls that ran through the Hades. If I became the god of the Hades, I would naturally obtain a divine concept like undead escort, and I would naturally be able to escape my embarrassing status as an evil god. You want me to be your fighter? Don't even think about it. I admitted that I didn't have any good intentions. However, Stonevilla was indeed experienced as he instantly saw through my plan. If he agreed, he would obtain the concept of urgent need, as well as naturally become a member of the Hades. A god's first concept would be their foundation, and it would be quite difficult to change once they decided on it. In that case, I'll just make do with being the only river god of all the rivers in the land of spring. The creator gods had created the world in 7 days. Who knew how many days and months our battle had already lasted? The Titans had already completed the rough fusion of the continents above the Hades. Since there was a continent and even a life plane with a natural cycle was about to be created, there would naturally be oceans, lakes, and rivers. In that case, it would naturally be possible to have a river god. As for why I didn't have a sea god, that was because that fragmented continent still hadn't created a region that could be called Shanghai yet. I directly sent a new map to Stonevilla. The continents that had been pieced together had countless chasms. When these chasms were filled with rainwater, the total area created by the countless tributaries would barely be comparable to an ocean. Becoming the ruler of all the rivers in this continent would be quite suitable for Stonevilla's current power level. Stonevilla was hesitating. He knew that the concept of a water god could be extended. Becoming the guardian of a river to become a sea god would be a natural progression. With this concept as a springboard, he would have the chance to challenge the current sea god in the future. Of course, the first concept would be quite difficult to change. Since Stonevilla had become the river god of the land of spring, he would naturally be connected to the land of Hades's dimensional walls. Although he wasn't under my jurisdiction, it was still impossible for me to completely abandon this plane. It was just that I would have to change hands a few times, and he would still be my fighter. However, I didn't think that Stonevilla would be able to understand the relationship between the land of spring and the land of Hades. He was most likely a river god of a separate dimension, which had nothing to do with me. This was my favorite negotiation technique. First, I would say something that was obviously a trap that the other side would never agree to. Then, I would toss out a proposal that seemed acceptable, but was actually no different from the previous proposal. If the other side saw through me again, I would toss out an appropriate compromise proposal, but it would still be a trap proposal. In the end, the other side's treatment would depend on the other side's power level as well as how smart they were. But obviously, if Stonevilla was smart, he wouldn't be in such a situation right now. Stonevilla glared at the main god-level demon who had the highest growth rate in all of history. He felt that Stonevilla was even more unfathomable than before. He then glanced at the pillar of ice behind him. The only thing he cared about in this world was behind him. Stonevilla directly nodded, not even giving Stonevilla the chance to say his third trap proposal. We agree. Although we were once the rulers of the seas, we also know that there's nothing wrong with temporarily living among the streams when the winds and the waves are rampant. As a leader, temporarily enduring humiliation is also the duty of a leader. Ignoring how Stonevilla said all this while, and ignoring how blind he was when he acted Stonevilla decided to accept the position of river god. The crown on his head was changed, becoming less extravagant and more simple. His temporary body created from ice and snow now seemed more real. At this moment, all the rivers in the land of spring now had a master, and I had recruited yet another powerful fighter into my war chariot. His power circulated in his chest, and his bloodline became even more concentrated. Stonevilla raised his head and roared angrily. His body suddenly expanded as he regained a portion of his power. Although he was only a river god, he was far stronger than an evil god who didn't have any concept of existence. Existence was power. Stonevilla's power had greatly increased, and he was just about to start punishing this young man, who didn't respect his seniors at all when he suddenly sheathed his sword and said something that nobody present could understand. "I surrender. Bro, I helped you screw over this bastard. Count it as a small gift. Since you've calmed down, let's talk. Perhaps we have a common enemy, such as Mother Cynthia, who destroyed the Mist Kingdom." At this point, Stonevilla's normally frivolous expression now had some fanaticism and joy on it. The essence of chaos is to be unknowable, unfathomable, and uncontrollable. Chaos is something that has its own master, so why would it still be called chaos? If the Chaos Abyss has its own will, does it even deserve to be called the Chaos Abyss? It's time for the Chaos Abyss to return to chaos, so that we can obtain true freedom. Chapter 473. The pure dualism of good and evil only exists on paper. There's no such thing as an absolute divide between black and white. Everything began because of the two goddesses' divergent views on power. Compared to the mortal world's creations, they're incredibly pure. They're so pure that they dragged the entire world into their divergent views. The one who gave an explanation in the end wasn't Cavendish. Instead, it was Ilmigia, who had just successfully retreated from a nearby battlefield. However, even though her entire body was charred black, she still did her best to put on a serious expression, which was rather amusing. "I didn't betray my species. I only betrayed the will of the Chaos Abyss. That's why I didn't inform my species before. It's just that I need to keep this a secret. If even a tiny bit of information is leaked, all my plans will be for naught." Carwin's obviously wasn't someone who was good at explaining things. Ilmigia's mature voice had a natural allure to it, as if she intended to tell him everything that had happened, but, "Shut up, Cavendish. Tell me." Currently, I was astonished by the information I just learned, as well as angry at how Cavendish called me Cynthia. There were some things that I only wanted to hear the answer from the person herself. As expected, the mastermind behind the destruction of the Mist Kingdom was Cynthia? Mother Cynthia? You knew the truth, yet you still recognized her as your mother, and you're even able to endure it. I'm just stating the truth, Roland. Cynthia is indeed my birth mother. You know about the so-called Children of Fate, right? Then do you know how the Children of Fate came to be? Children of Fate? You actually found out about that as well? Aren't they important chess pieces that have the deepest ties to karma, capable of changing the fate of the entire world? Yes, they were only chess pieces. Chess pieces that powerful individuals used to control the entire game. No matter how powerful they were still chess pieces controlled by the mastermind behind the scenes. No matter how hard they worked, no matter how many victories and honors they obtained, they would only bring the holy war to the next cycle. This was the case for Roland from back in the day, and it was the same for Roland in the game's history. Then, how did they manage to change the fate of all living creatures? Have you thought about it? Cavendish's words stunned me. I had only recently found out about Destiny's Child. I didn't have the time to delve into the messy matters before me. Chaos itself is unfathomable. If fate is the power of order, then breaking the shackles of fate and returning everything to the power of chaos is naturally the power of the chaos abyss. The so-called child of destiny is the child of the abyss, the prince of the abyss. Not only do I have to call Cynthia mother, you are also her child. Cavendish revealed a playful smile. Time and space are the most fundamental rules of order. Their products are the prophecies that can see through everything. As an enemy, Mother Cynthia naturally needs a child of destiny who can shatter all prophecies. Before every holy war, Mother Cynthia would carry out her duty as creator. She would split her own soul and give it the ability to evolve infinitely. She would construct a new artificial soul and then send it into the mortal world. The Order faction calls him the Child of Destiny, but if I had to say, it's more like shattering the Child of Destiny. It would seem that the goddess of order Astria on your side didn't tell you the truth. No, it's very easy to see through lies to you. If she isn't an idiot, she probably didn't tell you the entire truth. So much information was revealed to me. After reviewing and summarizing, it seemed that the truth was right in front of me. Indeed, my system wasn't lying. She just didn't tell me the entire truth. This was one of my most familiar language techniques, and I was actually using it on myself. The Order faction has a great prophet, so naturally the Chaos faction will have a child of the Abyss. The previous generation's child of the Abyss was fooled by Astria, and the Prince of the Abyss mysteriously became a pillar of order. That's already hilarious enough, but Astria still wasn't reassured. In the end, she actually killed him and tricked him into giving up his sense of self, becoming a god with no personality. He was completely finished. Roland was willing. He was unable to resist Cynthia's temptation and could fall at any moment. Shut up. Pain? Anger? Distrust? Probably both. I roared angrily in my heart. I felt an indescribable sense of frustration that made me want to raise my head and roar angrily. However, I still forced out a smile. At such a time, I couldn't allow my negative emotions to affect my judgment. Hey, bro, don't smile at me like that. It's really scary. The corner of your mouth. I wiped it with my hand, only to find that it was covered in blood. I then discovered that I had unknowingly bitten the corner of my mouth. It would seem that I had unknowingly bitten it too hard. I couldn't allow myself to be dragged along by her words and rhythm any longer. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them again as I asked in a heavy tone. Continue. What exactly happened between us back in the day? Yep, and this might very well be the last holy war. Mother Cynthia desired the strongest child of the Abyss in all of history to defeat her old rival. No, she desired to completely destroy her old rival. As you know, the Creator Goddess is the ruler of this dimension. As long as it's a product of this dimension, it's impossible to destroy her. These words caused me to mysteriously think of a possibility that caused my hair to stand on end. However, the next instant this guess of mine was confirmed. Perhaps you already know that the HE dimension was nearly destroyed by an invasion from another dimension. This was also the reason why the two goddesses desired to become stronger. And this invasion from another dimension also gave Mother Cynthia, who had nowhere else to go at this moment, Cavendish paused for a moment with a malicious expression as he smiled evilly. Since this dimension doesn't have the knowledge or power to kill the creator goddess, perhaps another dimension will. That's why, as the creator goddess of this dimension, she paid a tremendous price to shatter her dimensional wall and first cast the soul of the child of the abyss into another dimension, allowing it to obtain the knowledge and memories of that dimension. Then, she pulled it back as if she was fishing. I fell silent. Although I had long since expected this, as there were only certainties and no coincidences in this world, the truth would always be difficult to accept. As expected, even transmigration was controlled by someone else. Were we nothing more than chess pieces from the very start? You should already know what happened next. The previous generation's child of the abyss was intercepted by the Order faction. The will of the Chaos Abyss directly possessed the child of the abyss. The result was that when Astria arrived, the remnant souls of the two goddesses fought again and forcefully tore the child of the abyss into two halves. And the most inconceivable part was that every soul should have a portion of order and chaos. However, the two halves of a soul that were torn apart were far purer than an ordinary person's soul. If an ordinary soul is a ratio of 5 to 5, then the child of the abyss is more than 9 to 1. And so, the true child of the abyss and child of order were born. They were born with the power of chaos and order. Cavendish was still smiling as if he was talking about someone else's matters. It's just like the difference between the upper and lower planes. The portion that was inclined towards order would instinctively float up and be born first, becoming the older brother. The portion that was inclined towards chaos would sink down and become the younger brother. For the two sisters, this was simply a happy ending, and so, they each possessed one of the child of the abyss and attempted to control their fates so that they would ultimately fight and kill each other. Now that I had explained things to such an extent, I could pretty much imagine what would happen next. Cynthia possessed Carwin's body and gave him the ability to grow like a golden finger. Cynthia also arranged the most fatal misfortune for the child of the abyss, hoping that he would become even more powerful through this misfortune. And so, our mist kingdom was destroyed because of this. Meanwhile, Astria possessed me and learned about the system from the messy novels in my head. She then combined it with information from other worlds and transformed her prophecy into a game guide to guide my fate. And so, Cavendish became the Prince of the Abyss, while I became the so-called illegitimate child of the Holy Light. But, they finally went too far. Their chess pieces were out of their control. Maniacal laughter appeared on Carwin's familiar face. His mysterious fanaticism was frightening. Carwin's smile actually began to distort with fear, excitement, fear, and fearlessness. All sorts of emotions made Carwin's face look as if it was forcefully pieced together from a jigsaw puzzle. I could sense that this was the true Carwin's, the purest child of the Chaos Abyss after all order was taken away from him. Haha, my dearest older brother, you should have knowledge from other worlds, right? Right? I don't have any at all, so it can only be because you have it. You also invented all those messy things when you were young, so you must have knowledge from other worlds. And to be able to create such a world, it must also be the result of knowledge from other worlds. Yep, I'm so happy. The goal that Cynthia's mother didn't have much hope for has actually been realized. A weapon that can truly kill the creator goddess has actually been successfully created. Do you know how happy I was when I heard this news? Cavendish's fanatical gaze looked towards this world of ice and snow as if he could see through everything. He saw the Tower of Holy Light's salvation at the top, as well as the invisible Tower of Death. Cavendish had long since known the structure of the four towers, and he had come to this tower of ice precisely for this moment. Wonderful, truly wonderful! This is the world. Older brother, you've succeeded. It's this powerful weapon that can slay the gods. You've become the guillotine, and I've brought the prisoners awaiting death. Now we can execute the two creator goddesses who caused the entire world to suffer. Let us take revenge. Let us first kill our mother, and then kill that fake goddess of order. Come, let us destroy the shackles of the old generation and return freedom to chaos. Let everything return to freedom and truth. This is both revenge and a declaration of ascending to the throne. The era of the twin goddesses of order has ended, and the future era belongs to us, the twin stars of order and chaos. Chapter 474. The source of the holy war was the goddesses of chaos and chaos. Perhaps their initial hope was that all living creatures would become stronger and not be destroyed by invaders from the outside world, but the end result was, thousands of years of accumulation built a glorious civilization, but it's like a sand castle built by a child on a beach. When the next wave of the sea comes, all that's left is ruins. Were all the blooming flowers just a dream? Are all the sacrifices and hard work for nothing? The pursuit of fame and fortune was usually harmless, but lofty ideals could destroy the world. Life was like a drama, and the world was unpredictable. Sometimes the truth was far more painful than a lie. Under the watchful eyes of the Most High One, all life was like a circus, constantly playing out the farce of life and death. In the end, no matter how far civilization had developed, what awaited them was only intermittent harvests. Just when would this despairing fate end? Hatred? Resentment? Was he dissatisfied? Of course. Even if the lives of mortals are given by them, even if the world under our feet is given by them, can parents take the lives of their children at will? Can they turn the hardships of mortals into a joke? Everyone else respected the two goddesses of chaos, and even praised them as divine detectives. However, I only felt hatred towards them. After all, I had received so many years of atheistic education, and my rational thinking made it impossible for me to believe in any particular god. In my eyes, rather than saying that the two goddesses of chaos were respectable goddesses of creation, it would be more accurate to say that they were two selfish bastards. If there's a chance, I must kill them and put an end to all of this. This was not the first time he had thought of this, and he had even tried it out. They are invincible in He because they are the true masters of He and will receive the support of the entire world. However, in a brand new world, they are just a more difficult opponent to deal with. They can be defeated or even killed. If Cynthia hadn't done something to him, then this was the only way. All his thoughts returned to the only possibility. During the battle against Omdoroken, I created frigid winter earth in order to cut off all support for Omdoroken and use the power of another world to kill him. This was actually just a rehearsal, just to verify my thoughts and theories. The results made me happy, but also a little dejected. Creating a brand new world and killing the goddess of creation in it is possible, but to actually do it isn't practical. Just because the theory was correct didn't mean that it was half the battle. There were many problems exposed during the rehearsal, but two of them were fatal. First of all, my frigid winter earth hadn't been able to completely cut off Immortalorken's connection with the Earth Elemental Throne. In the end, I had to destroy the Earth Elemental Throne in order to obtain victory. This means that my current frigid winter earth is mostly useless against existences on the level of the Creator. Not only do I have to level up the entire world and increase its independence and isolation abilities, but I also have to completely defeat the goddess, but the goddess of earth, frigid winter creation, creator, and He god, goddess, and earth with the establishment of hell. This part of the difficulty had already been overcome. However, the other part of the difficulty made this backup plan only a backup plan that had no meaning at all. That was Goddess and of Saints. The Goddess and of Goddess God even Omdoroken, who was cut off from the frigid winter earth, forced me to use all my trump cards in order to barely win. Even if I took away their undefeatable powers, they would still be pure individuals with far more power than any main god. They would still be basically undefeatable existences. Even if I can temporarily cut off their connection to the God plane, what if I can't defeat them? Not only did the game's history have astonishing battle records of the goddess and goddess of creation killing main gods after awakening, Ale also proved that this path was impossible. And so, I could only continue with my backup plan. When Cavendish told me his goal, my first reaction wasn't to ask, should I kill them? But rather, that's impossible. Yet, Cavendish actually said that there was a chance to kill them. While I was astonished, many pieces of information flashed through my mind, and I finally realized what I had overlooked. Previously, the goddess and goddess of order's combat strength was calculated based on how powerful they would be after they awakened. After all, this was the only time they appeared in the game's history. But now, they're nothing more than remnant souls residing in our bodies. They've lost the protection of their physical bodies, so it's only natural that it's possible to kill them. New information brought new opportunities. If it wasn't for the fact that I had so many things on hand, I would have thought of this when my system was revealed to be the remnant souls of the goddess of order. How do I kill them? Even in this dimension, their souls are still indestructible. But they're still souls, and this dimension is specifically targeted at souls. The Tower of Death is the Tower of Souls of the Creator Goddesses. It can separate the two bastards from our bodies, and the Tower of Ice can bestow physical bodies upon the dead. In that case, if we give them their weakest physical bodies and drag them into the void, we'll naturally be able to completely end them. The Creator Goddesses were Creator-level existences, but the four pillars were also Creator-level existences. This was basically a different type of resurrection magic that would revive the two goddesses' remnant souls in a different method. It was only natural that they would be killed since they were now mortals. Stop arguing. Today shall be the day of your death. Cavendish's sudden angry shout surprised me. However, his bloodshot eyes and anger told me that he was talking about the person who had possessed his own soul. My system remained silent, but I could sense her rare fear. At this moment, I more or less understood Cavendish's plan. He had learned about the use of the four pillars of Hades from his spy. Since he had more information than I did, he was the first to think of this possibility. Unlike the goddess of order, who could only disguise herself as my system, Cynthia was still in control of the chaos abyss, so she should still have the ability to move freely. In that case, he must have used some method to trick Cynthia into coming to his body and bringing her to the guillotine. That was why he said that he had brought a prisoner on death row. After he learned about my plan, not only did he not ruin it, he even secretly helped my plan. In the end, he even helped my grand plan to obtain additional results. From a certain standpoint, this was actually a different type of cooperation. And now, he was bringing Cynthia to the Tower of Ice. His so-called surrender had been nothing more than a joke. This had been his plan from the very start. I had always wanted to defeat or even kill the two creator goddesses of order and chaos. But now that this opportunity was truly in my hands, I was hesitating. You don't intend to say anything? My system remained silent, as if she had already placed her fate in my hands. What will happen if you really die? Will the world of He be affected? This time I had an answer. Relax. Even if my divine soul is destroyed, it won't directly affect the world. I've already been rejected by the source of order. I'm nothing more than a lonely soul. However, Cynthia is different. She's still the Chaos Abyss's master. If you kill her, that means that all the Chaos Abyss and demons will go out of control. There will be no limit to this holy war. The pure Chaos Abyss will make the demons far stronger than you can imagine. Their desire for souls will be endless. Enough. I only want to know how you're doing. Astria's angry rebuke interrupted Cynthia's explanation. However, she continued to explain her own thoughts. Perhaps killing Cynthia will end everything, but the Chaos Abyss will go out of control. You've already accomplished this. True peace is just around the corner. As long as you watch Cynthia fall into a deep sleep due to a lack of nourishment, the holy war will end. There's no need to take any risk. You know that without Cynthia's control, the demons will never stop their slaughter. The holy war will never end. I know that my sister and I have committed crimes. That's why you can kill me. This is the original sin that I deserve. But you need to think about the consequences of killing Cynthia. We've already seen the dawn. Don't miss this final chance. I never expected that you would be so naive. Do you think that Cynthia will have a future if you let her be? Indeed, the river Styx has cut off Cynthia's supplies. However, she has an even more direct method of replenishing herself. She can use her demon army to forcefully harvest souls and use blood sacrifices to make up for her needs. Even if she needs to sacrifice all the living in the mortal plane in order to revive herself, she will still do so. This holy war has never had a path of retreat from the very start. This wasn't something I said without thinking. This was the result of my discussion with Ale. We never believed that just the establishment of the Hades would be enough to end everything. Out of the three factions of the Chaos Abyss, the Hades of Hades, and the Divine Kingdom of Order, we were still the weakest. Our original expectations were because we had underestimated the moral limits of the goddesses. Only absorbing the naturally split soul shards in the cycle of reincarnation to obtain nourishment will definitely not be as good as completely devouring souls. Once the goddesses lose the relatively gentle possibility of awakening, they definitely won't allow themselves to fall into eternal slumber. The worst result will be that both factions will kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. They'll do anything to harvest the souls of mortals in order to feed their own mothers. That will be a massacre of the entire mortal plane. As the weaker third faction, going against both factions at the same time will be the equivalent of suicide. We need to take advantage of the conflict between both sides. That's why we can only cut off the possibility of one side awakening. That's the only way to end the holy war, rather than having the holy war completely become a battle to the death. Obviously, the Order faction was easier to accept than the Chaos faction. At the very least, Ale believed that Astria would be easier to deal with than Cynthia. That was why we preserved the Heaven's Pillar, but cut off the river Styx. That was why we preserved enough mortal strength and mortal heroes in order to deal with the Chaos Abyss's possible retaliation. The Dark Elf Knight, Absolute Gentleman Alliance, Northland's Mist Alliance, underground factions, powerful human countries, and so on. Even if we successfully established the Hades, the mortals' future would still be opened up by mortals. The final holy war would naturally be ended by mortals themselves. And now there were so many difficult problems before me. How should I deal with Astria? Wouldn't killing Cynthia be equivalent to releasing all the demons in the Chaos Abyss? Wouldn't keeping Cynthia alive be equivalent to letting her control all the demon lords and harvest all the lives in the mortal plane? As for Cavendish, perhaps it was only my intuition, or perhaps it was a strange connection between my two souls, but I suddenly felt that Cavendish was far more dangerous than Cynthia. He was more like the Chaos Abyss. If Cynthia dies, will you be able to restrict all the demon lords and control the war? Don't be so naive. Chaos has never needed an eternal leader. Every demon wishes to climb higher. This is an instinct engraved in their bloodline. Restrict? How is that possible? Besides, why would I do such a boring thing? Cavendish didn't hide his own expectations, nor was he able to hide them. His answer also confirmed my judgment of Cavendish. He desired war, desired to obtain freedom in the Chaos Abyss, and desired to kill Cynthia, who was suppressing the Chaos Abyss. He believed that this would make her happy. He had no confidence in reaching the top of the Chaos Abyss, nor did he have any plans to obtain power. That seemingly divine plan was likely nothing more than a spontaneous idea. Damned creature of instincts. He managed to seize this opportunity with just his intuition alone. He simply wished for the cheating administrator to leave, so that this war that was sweeping the entire world would become more interesting. As for the result? Would he become the new Chaos Abyss Master because of this? He didn't care at all if the entire mortal plane would be destroyed because of this. He only wished that he could have fun. Before I could make a decision, the entire mortal plane suddenly began to shake. Judging from the rampaging energy storms, it seemed that the war in the Seven Hells had suddenly escalated. I even received an urgent report from Sophocles the Deceiver that he had suddenly broken his peace contract. Breaking a soul contract signed with a demon's true name would require a tremendous price. Hurry up and make your decision. We don't have much time. Look, some people have already been moved by Cynthia's request for reinforcements. Cynthia, just what did you promise to make those old fellows get serious? Doesn't this mean that I have a chance to fight against them? I've waited for so many years. How interesting. Chapter 475. How should I decide? Everyone was looking at me, as if my decision would decide the fate of the entire world. Yep, this was the truth. My current decision could indeed affect Hei's fate. Apart from a math exam, it would be quite difficult to make a completely correct decision in this world. While I would obtain some benefits, I would also lose something of equal value. I had to choose at this moment. Everyone's eyes were on me. Ambiguity was the only option that couldn't be chosen. And I had already made my decision. Cavendish had an expression of excitement as he looked at me, as if he had already noticed something. This is the Hades, so let's do things according to the rules of the Hades. Both goddesses are obviously unforgivable, but there's a difference. I did my best to organize my words so that my favoritism wouldn't be too obvious. In this world, intentionally killing someone is obviously a capital crime, but causing someone else's death through negligence will only result in a sentence of 7 or 8 years at most. The results are the same for both sides, but whether or not they have any malice is the core mechanism for determining who is guilty. Cynthia can't escape death. As for Astria, let's imprison her for life. I'll be responsible for imprisoning her until the end of the world. Cavendish didn't hide his disappointment at all. This wasn't the answer he desired at all. You trust that woman that much? Yep, I trust her more than I trust you. That's right, the law's judgment was only a reference. What truly made the decision was still my own subjective opinion. I trusted Astria, which was why I hoped that she would be able to survive. As for whether or not she would cause any trouble in the future. Back when I took the wrong path, Adam and Marguerite imprisoned me for more than 100 years. Now, in order to prevent Astria from doing anything unpleasant, I would simply imprison her. Since the soul tower can be used to separate souls, it can naturally be strengthened as well. I can guarantee with my own soul that she won't ever regain her freedom. Cynthia's death might cause the holy war to go out of control? Even if she was still alive, the holy war would still go out of control. In order to end this holy war and destroy the fate of the world between the two goddesses, one of the creator goddesses would have to die. Since I had decided to let Astria live, it was only natural that I would have to kill Cynthia. Ale and Ale had previously come up with a strategy that would be biased towards order while remaining neutral. As for what was a mother? I pretended that I didn't hear anything at all. My parents in my previous life were on Earth, while my parents in this life had already died more than 300 years ago. If I really had to calculate it, a more general definition would be that all life in the world originated from the creator goddesses. Weren't we all their children? She didn't seem to have any maternal love. We were simply created by her. Yet, endless misfortune was arranged for us. And when I thought about how the Mist Kingdom and my birth parents would be destroyed because of her, I lost even the last bit of affection I had for her. On the other hand, Cavendish's face was filled with displeasure. He did not conceal his dissatisfaction at all. This was not the answer he was hoping for. Astria is trustworthy? Have you forgotten what happened to the god of holy light? From a certain point of view, Roland could be considered our common elder brother, but he was deceived by that woman and became a tool to abandon himself. Do you want to end up the same way? Hearing this, I smiled. At least in certain aspects, I was completely different from Cavendish. You think you can relax by pushing your guilt and regret onto others? I don't have such a habit. Perhaps Astria gave me advice or even subconsciously tried to guide me. But for me to reach where I am today, every step I took was my own choice. Perhaps I'll feel pain and regret for my past calamities, but I'm not foolish enough to deny my own past. Nor will I be weak enough to push my guilt onto others. I paused for a moment as my past memories appeared in front of me. Although most of them were painful, there was nothing worth regretting. Even if everything happened again, it probably wouldn't be any different. My life is the path that I chose for myself. I have eyes, a brain, hands, and feet. I can see and think. Even if others give me advice and guidance, in the end, it's still my own heart that makes the decision. I don't know what happened to Roland back then, nor do I want to know. At the very least, I feel that Astria is trustworthy, and she didn't harm me. That's enough for me. Yes, no matter how many times I said it, everything could be an excuse. It was simply because I trusted Astria. Astria, my system, had been by my side for more than 300 years, and she had always guided me. When I was a holy knight, she was the radiant holy knight training system. When I fell into darkness, she gave me evil point. When I tried to change my fate, I ended up becoming fate point. Astria wasn't the one guiding my fate. Rather, I was the one changing her. I could guess that perhaps Astria intentionally pretended to be a mindless system in hopes that she wouldn't affect my judgment too much. She probably only guided me in my pursuit of power. Without her help, it would have been impossible for me to create the Hades. I could guess what happened back then. From a certain standpoint, I had to thank Cavendish's existence. The Chaos bloodline would be attracted to the Chaos Abyss, and the Chaos Abyss's whispers would never stop. As a child of the Chaos Abyss, Roland would probably have to listen to the whispers of demons for several hours every day and night. It wouldn't be strange for him to make such a decision in the end, because he couldn't bear it any longer. Countless Chaos bloodlines, including Eliza and Cavendish, had all entered the Chaos Abyss in the end. I didn't hear any whispers from the Chaos Abyss. No matter how I looked at it, Cavendish was the one who helped me. He took over most of my Chaos bloodline, which also attracted Cynthia's attention. If my system had let Cynthia do whatever she wanted, and such a speechless Gemini split didn't happen, she would have been the Chaos Abyss Prince Roland from the game's history. Thank you. After a long period of silence, Astria finally thanked me. I knew that she wasn't thanking me for not killing her. She was thanking me for trusting her. No need to thank me. Verbal thanks aren't sincere at all. Remember to repay me with your body. Right, if that's the case, what's with the daily quests? Myth-ranked quests can be understood as major changes in fate that will bring about a large amount of the power of fate, but daily quests are both annoying and trivial. You won't be able to obtain anything from daily quests, will you? Your very existence is to break fate. That power will only increase as time passes. As for those daily quests, don't you think they're quite interesting and creative? They're quite suitable for killing time? I immediately got angry and wanted to take back what little trust one had left. Astria had actually made me suffer for several hundred years just for fun? It wasn't just to make you suffer. Although it's indeed quite interesting to see you suffer. I should at least find a reason to give you points. If I told you that you could increase your income by doing nothing at all, wouldn't you become as lazy as a pig and stay at home all day? If you stay at home for too long, your heart will become very, very dark. Just look at your younger brother. Isn't he an obvious example? Seeing how anxious Cavendish was becoming, I thought back to the liches that had gone crazy because they stayed at home for too long. I suddenly felt that Astria's words made sense, and I couldn't counter them at all. Could it be that Astria had truly become a pervert because he stayed at home for too long and had too little contact with others? Shut up! It was unknown who Cavendish was angrily shouting at. He paced back and forth while constantly pinching his head. It was obvious that something was wrong. Since everything was out in the open, and Cynthia's Armageddon was about to arrive, my mind was still calm, but Astria's mind was probably in chaos. Cavendish covered his right eye as he lowered his head and panted heavily. It was obvious that he wasn't in a good condition. Looking through the gaps between his fingers, I could see that his right eye was completely bloodshot, and his pupil, which had become vertical, was filled with killing intent and anger. He was growling in his throat as if he was suppressing something. "Ha, trust? You'll regret it." "Ha, I won't. Have you ever seen me regret anything? If someone really did lie to me, I'll admit that I was stupid and greedy, and then I'll just think of a way to take revenge. Regretting something won't change anything. It'll only make me feel bad." I didn't care at all about Cavendish's murderous expression at all. I shrugged, feeling even more relaxed now. I didn't pretend to be calm at all. I was even more relaxed inside than I appeared on the surface. Cavendish's bottom line for this negotiation was quite clear: kill Cynthia and give the Chaos Abyss its freedom. Since I had already agreed to this condition, it meant that we had already reached an agreement. As for everything else, it didn't matter if we talked about it or not. Let's just treat it as a form of brotherhood. Perhaps this would be our last chance to talk face to face. My head is about to explode. This crazy bitch is insane. When will she start? Hurry up and kill her so I can finally have a good night's sleep. I shrugged helplessly. I wanted to hurry up as well, but didn't you want to use the Tower of Death to split your soul? That's quite difficult and I can't do it. Let's wait until Ale sleeps enough first. The 4 pillars each had their own duties. It would be enough for them to operate normally. Splitting a creator god's soul wasn't something that could be done on its own. What if Ale didn't wake up? Then I would just have to wait. But I felt that with Ale's foundational abilities, he would probably be the first pillar god to truly awaken. Actually, you can take some action first. For example, go kill that Sophocles the Deceiver or something. I find him quite annoying. Once the Chaos Abyss regains its freedom, you'll have one less competitor. Ha, a free fighter sent to my doorstep was truly delightful. I had thought that Cavendish would agree to my request. That was because he had an impatient personality, and it was obvious that he needed an opponent to vent on. Plus, he wouldn't just watch as a Chaos main god came to save Cynthia. With his personality, he should have taken the initiative to attack. But when he heard what I said, he actually calmed down. Contrary to my expectations, Cavendish wasn't in a hurry at all. Instead, he slowly walked to the side and suddenly reached out with his hand. That pot of fish soup appeared once again. Then, he took out several stools and stood on them while stirring the fish soup with a blender. I'm not in a hurry. Let's just wait. It's almost done. Let's eat some fresh fish soup first. After today, we probably won't have a chance to sit down and eat together again. That fishtail over there. How about some fresh and juicy fish meat? It's about the same age as you. Chapter 476. Even if the chess game between the two sides was confusing, it was often possible to distinguish the situation. At the very least, it was clear who had the upper hand and who was inferior at a glance. However, if it became a 3-nation or 4-nation military chess, even the chess pieces on the next side were unknown, and the situation naturally became confusing. Originally, we had been making a living in between the Chaos faction and the Order faction, so it could be said that we were victorious amidst the chaos. This had become a 3-way setup, so many people's roles were naturally confused. There were quite a few double or triple spies, such as the Queen of Temptations or myself. I had multiple identities behind my back, and Carwins had also interfered. This was basically a four-way military chess game with multiple parties involved. It was truly chaotic. The situation was chaotic. Everyone had their own thoughts, plans. But it wasn't difficult for me to tell the difference between friend and foe. After all, everyone in the world was motivated by personal benefit. Seeing what benefits everyone desired and whether or not they wanted the Hades to be successfully established would allow me to tell the difference between friend and foe. Now that the chess game was reaching its end, it was only natural that I would be able to see things even more clearly. The Order faction, which was weaker to begin with, was no longer under any pressure. The god of holy light, Roland's incarnation, had been killed by 3 consecutive god-ranked forbidden spells. Although incarnations were consumable items to begin with, it was impossible to recover this divine power, so successfully weakening the main body was a good thing. And the god of wisdom hadn't come here to make life difficult for us in the first place. Everything would be fine as long as we reached an agreement. Perhaps we would even gain another ally in the future. From a certain standpoint, this was another drawback of being too much of an Order faction. Without emotions or sufficient benefits to motivate them, the relatively independent Order main gods naturally wouldn't fight to the death for the emotionless source of order. From the very start, our main opponents had been the Chaos faction under Cynthia's command. We had used almost all of our aces on them. The Chaos faction still had 3 main gods on the battlefield. 2 of them were eternally hungry beasts that were still tearing at each other, so let's ignore them for now. Chaos war god Danavis was being heavily taken care of. One was the Demon Lord, and the other had already angered the leader of the 7 original sins. Danavis wouldn't be easy to deal with. I had even prepared a backup for him, so it shouldn't be a problem. As for Deceiver the Deceiver, Envy Marsalit, and Pride Omar, who had broken the truce, had already completed their revivals. I directly ordered them to go support Cher, but I didn't order them to fight to the death. If a main god-level existence was forced into a corner, they would definitely have a large number of trump cards up their sleeves. Since the Hades' strategic goal was only to stall for time, it would be better to maintain this balance of power on the battlefield. There was no need to force them into a life-and-death struggle. Cavendish was very bored sitting there. He could already carve a stone chessboard, but he had no intention of going to the battlefield to fight against a demon lord. "Do you think I'm a fool? You want me to be your free fighter until I complete my goal? I'll wait here." As for the fish soup, it had already been thrown to the side, not even willing to look at it. Just a single mouthful was enough to make the Abyss Prince's face turn green, and he immediately ran to the side and retched for a long time. This was far more powerful than any poison. After all, a main god-level demon should be naturally immune to all poisons. I originally didn't intend on eating it, but seeing Cavendish's reaction, I got curious and also tried a mouthful. I then immediately switched to another incarnation and tried to forget what I had just seen. The larger a fish was, the harder and older its flesh would be. As a demon lord, this fish's flesh would be able to ignore normal myth-ranked weapons. It wouldn't soften just by cooking it. Cavendish tossed in a large amount of strange items in order to make the fish palatable, such as powerful corrosive and sharpening potions, alchemy potions that would give weapons an armor-piercing effect, and magic flames that would corrode the ground of the Chaos Abyss. It seemed that the fish meat had indeed softened due to his random stirring. However, the color, taste, and super corrosive. I decided to switch to another incarnation. That would be much more direct than creating a new head and face. I tossed aside the super corrosive fish soup. In fact, I felt disgusted just looking at it. I actually wanted to ask Cavendish for some information on my enemies. To chat with him. What other trump cards do they have? Are there any that are easy to deal with? As long as you're willing to pay the price, anything is possible. However, I don't think it's a good idea to force them to fight to the death right now. Right, if I'm not mistaken, after the Hades are completed, all existences in this dimension are unable to leave? He was actually asking for information on us? Yep, the Hades are unable to leave. If the souls of the dead want to leave, they can only enter the cycle of reincarnation. This is the ironclad law of the Hades. All existences must obey it. Since I couldn't keep this a secret, of course I could tell him. Of course, if I misheard or misunderstood, it wouldn't be my fault. What's wrong with you? I, Womians Roland, am one of the 4 pillar gods of the Hades. I've been tightly bound by the laws of the Hades. The 4 pillar gods will never be able to leave. This is the foundation of the Hades. I can guarantee it with my soul. The 4 pillar gods? Ha, you're just as always a liar who only tells the truth. Don't you know that whenever you're serious, you're probably lying? And as long as you swear, you're definitely lying. Was that so? Did I actually have such a habit? Thinking back, I was rendered speechless. That seemed to be the truth. That's wonderful. It would seem that we'll have another chance to fight again. Right, since you're so free, why don't you spar with me? Did I sound like I had a lot of free time? Yep, I did have a lot of free time, but I wouldn't foolishly spar with Cavendish. Would I be so foolish as to spar with a holy knight who was a professional sword saint? So you're now a holy knight instead of a sword saint? That's so convenient to remember. Humph, now that the Hades were doing so well, and I was in a good mood, I might as well pretend that I didn't hear anything. The Hades were operating more and more smoothly now. The only enemies left were the Chaos main gods. Cavendish had made up for the weakness of the Earth elemental pillars, which was originally lacking in mobile combat strength. Yep, Cavendish had made up for this weakness. No matter how open-minded he was, since he was using the Tower of Ice and Tower of Death, he would naturally be guarding these 2 towers before the 4 pillar gods awakened. In that case, he would naturally become my fighter. What about after the 4 pillar gods awakened? As long as Ale could successfully awaken, there would be nothing for me to worry about. So what if Ale turned on me? The current situation seemed quite good. If it wasn't for the fact that the current situation wasn't suitable for me, I would have even started singing a little song. Suddenly, I felt that it was rare for the situation to be so good. It seemed that I could go crazy for a bit. The war is about to end. My long-cherished wish of so many years is about to be realized. I'm now invincible. Ha ha ha, after this war ends, I'll be able to return home and get married. Cough, cough, don't look at me so strangely. I was just joking. Isn't it funny? I had carefully prepared 3 lines for this catchphrase, but not a single person laughed. This was quite embarrassing. I suddenly feel like there's a dangerous evil intent in your tone. This is a new curse method. I'm getting goosebumps. It seems that it's quite effective. Even though I was clearly joking, Harlois questioned me with such a serious expression. This was quite difficult to accept. Were Harlois truly foolish otherworlders? Return home and get married? Marry who? Even Eliza, who was focused on her personal evolution, sent me a message of dissatisfaction. Still, this reminded me that I needed to send her to the land of spring as soon as possible. If I waited any longer, it would be too late. Alright, at least I still have my system. Astria, this joke isn't cold at all. I seem to have found yet another reason to keep Astria around. For the sake of having a happy life in the future, how could I not have a servant who ridiculed me by my side? Yep, your sense of humor is just as incorrigible as ever. You're also just as jinxed as ever. Take a look at Ah Dang's battle situation. The situation has reversed yet again. I intend to give you the title of Those Who Seek Death Will Die. This will increase the chances of you successfully jinxing yourself. Do you like it? What? I turned my attention to Ah Dang's battle situation in hell. However, I saw an inconceivable scene. 2 gigantic beasts that should have been tearing each other apart had vanished without a trace. Only a gigantic demon egg was currently hatching. When I checked my clone's memories, I discovered an inconceivable scene. Just 1 minute ago, Carl, the turbid nightmare, the low-intelligence creature whose name was the sound of his own stomach moving, suddenly used a series of incredibly difficult binding magic arrays to bind Ah Dang. And then, that gigantic piece of meat suddenly opened up, revealing an abnormally beautiful female face hidden within. She actually swallowed Ah Dang in one gulp, and then transformed into a demon egg filled with the power of the Chaos Abyss. This demon egg was gigantic. Although it was an egg, it wasn't completely round. It was as if countless pieces of meat were piled up together. The most eye-catching part was that the crevices on its surface kept flashing with a strange green light, which seemed to be some kind of magic rune. Some magic runes even twisted into faces that were wailing in pain, making anyone who saw them feel quite uncomfortable. According to my information, this demon relied on devouring to survive. The only meaning of its existence was to constantly eat and evolve. Its existence was completely in accordance with the will of the Chaos Abyss. However, due to its stupidity, it didn't have a noble title. In fact, it was even viewed as a type of calamity of the Chaos Abyss. The will of the Chaos Abyss. It was quite astonishing that Cynthia was able to control it to attack the Hades. I could understand that it was hiding its true power, but its constantly increasing energy level gave me a strong sense of threat. It also had a familiar instinctive sense of fear. I seemed to have experienced something like this before. Even if I didn't have an instinctive sense of danger, just based on its abnormal appearance, I knew that I couldn't just ignore it. What's going on with Carl? Why did he suddenly transform into an egg? I asked in a heavy tone. However, Cavendish suddenly chuckled. Carl? You've asked the right person. Only Cynthia and I know about this. The name Carl is nothing more than a joke. That's a piece of meat that's formed from countless Chaos Abyss remains and Chaos Abyss souls. It doesn't even have a sense of self, so how could it have a name? It doesn't have a sense of self? Then why did it come here? Cynthia is able to control a piece of meat that has no will of its own. Doesn't that mean it's using its own physical body? I can't be that unlucky. Cavendish had an expression of astonishment, as if he was saying that I actually guessed correctly. Ha, that's right. Cynthia's main body can't move, so she naturally thought of a way to create a backup physical body. However, don't worry too much. That's just a failed attempt. By the time it matures enough to carry Cynthia's divine soul, it'll probably have to eat and drink to its heart's content in several dozen holy wars. Cynthia has already given up on it. Now, even if it's forcefully activated, it won't be able to use its full combat strength without a divine soul. It won't be able to last for long. Cavendish, you're scamming me again. At this moment, I understood. Since Cynthia was facing the end of the world, she would naturally do everything she could to fight to the death. Activating this physical body to save her divine soul was a must. Since Cavendish knew about this yet didn't say it out loud, and was instead leisurely cooking soup here, it was obvious that he intended to wait for that piece of dead meat to revive and drag us into his trap. I had just been happily having Cavendish act as my fighter, but I unexpectedly fell into his trap instead. Of course I was displeased, and my mood instantly became terrible. Same to you, same to you. Ha! I'm actually quite happy that I'm able to fight alongside you one last time before I kill you. Meanwhile, Cavendish was smiling quite happily, as if he was proud of successfully tricking me. However, I felt like he was even happier that he would soon have an opponent to vent on. However, I didn't intend to waste any more time with him. The dimensional teleportation door had already opened, so I suddenly walked up and kicked him in. Womian's Roland's main body had already regenerated to the point where he could barely use it. I had gathered all the combat strength that I could use. I didn't have the foolish habit of letting my opponent finish his transformation. Chapter 477. The demon egg was there, exuding boundless might. It was extremely ugly, but it gave off a strange sense of intimacy, as if its very existence was a natural law, a part of this purgatory. Cavendish unhesitatingly released his hostility and greatly increased his power, as if he was preparing for battle. Roland, stop hiding it. Her physical body's minimum level is that of a main god. As long as she obtains a portion of Cynthia's special powers and abilities, her combat strength will explosively increase. Even if her physical body won't be able to last much longer, hiding it now is the equivalent of suicide. I was rather hesitant, not because I was worried about how strong the opponent before me would be, but rather because I was hesitant about whether or not I should take the risk and use this opportunity to see Cavendish's maximum combat strength, so that I could prepare myself for a possible future battle. However, I hesitated as I looked at the demon egg's increasing aura. The current situation had finally reached a balance, and it wouldn't be a good thing if Cynthia's backup physical body was too powerful. As for Cynthia's demon egg, I didn't really care, because I had already thought of a way to defeat it, no matter how powerful it was. Explode, reality, cough, cough, collapse, hell. Along with my will, the entire hell began to collapse, shatter, and transform into dust. Soon, this dimension would be separated from the Hades, and the entire Hades would reject it as trash and toss it into the void. Naturally, the gigantic demon egg would also be tossed into the void. As for what else was in the void, and whether or not she would be able to return, since there were no precedents, and I didn't even know how harsh the void's environment was, I didn't know. If this had been any other Chaos main god, the dimensional explosion wouldn't have been able to kill them. Instead, they would have been able to use this opportunity to enter deeper into hell. But right now, you're nothing more than a round egg. How can you possibly grow wings and fly? As for the gluttonies Hell and Audang, just like the mountain Inferno earlier, they could simply be regenerated. Who said that a boss transformation had to be fought head-on? Trying to transform into an egg in front of me, who had mastered the dimensional laws of space. Did you have a death wish? Since there's no rule that states that we must kill the other party, why don't we have a good fight? Cavendish's expression was very complicated, but more than that, he felt a sense of helplessness. It was as if he had already completed the tearful farewell ceremony, and the soldiers who were about to set out had just stepped onto the battlefield, only to be told that the battle had been temporarily cancelled due to the rain. Very quickly, the black mist began to close up. Just as we heaved a sigh of relief, a strong sense of danger suddenly made all of us look towards the opening. F***ck, the egg really grew wings and flew away. Yes, the eggs were really flying. What kind of monster was it? Its egg form had been forcefully broken, and its unevolved internal organs, heart and lungs were all exposed. Half of its body was still in the egg form, and the only parts that could be seen were probably one arm and two wings. The void was devouring the light, but the wings of light were unfolding mysteriously. 1, 2, 10, 100. Finally, countless wings of light covered the entire void. The void was now illuminated, and holy light illuminated every inch of it. Holy hymns echoed throughout the entire world. Even every corner of the Hades was playing the holy burial song from ancient epic. The light that leaked out of the canyon lit up the Inferno. This light actually directly destroyed all the ghosts in the Inferno. This was a light that was far purer and more holy than holy light. The goddess of chaos, the most ancient chaos that created the chaos abyss and demons, was actually so pure and holy. 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, 200 million. Pack, the combat strength measuring device exploded. Although I was just casually saying this, I mysteriously felt astonished in my heart. I didn't even need to measure any combat strength or energy level. Just by looking and feeling, I was able to sense the tremendous difference between the creator goddesses of chaos and main god. The difference between a creator and a creator? It's like an adult and an ant. Cavendish remained abnormally silent as he stared at the brightening sky. Then, a burning flame reignited in his eyes. This wasn't a negative emotion like anger or fear. Instead, it was a desire. He desired that he would one day surpass Cavendish. This was a type of delight. He was delighted that there was still a vast sky before him, that he could fly even higher. What an annoying hot-blooded type. With the goddess of creation being so powerful, it would seem that I'll need to revise my plans again. Just thinking about it is so troublesome. At this moment, I increasingly noticed that I was foundationally different from Cavendish. Perhaps this was the difference between Cavendish and I. When facing a powerful enemy, he would face them head-on, while I would think of ways to go around them or trap them. But now that I was facing an enemy that was nearly impossible to defeat, he happily accepted the future challenge and focused all his energy on becoming stronger. Meanwhile, I was trying to come up with all sorts of schemes and strategies to defeat him. It seems that he's the main character, while I'm on the wrong path. Still, I'm relaxed now. I understood Cavendish, just as Cavendish understood me. Although we were only cooperating for a short period of time, Cavendish had always desired to fight against me. This was an urge that stemmed from us sharing the same soul. He desired to defeat Cavendish in order to prove his own worth. He desired to prove that his path was stronger than Cavendish's, and he desired to prove that the quality of his soul was superior to Cavendish's. I guessed that he would still want to fight against me after all of this was over. But now that he could see an even higher mountain range, with his personality, he wouldn't come looking for trouble with me before he reached the peak. But I still can't avoid this battle. After all these miscellaneous matters are over, I can focus on improving my own personal strength. Otherwise, it would be far too embarrassing if Cavendish casually killed me. Even if I can't reach the goddess of creation's power level, I can't be too far away. I shook my head and dispelled these distracting thoughts. The opponent before me was our true goal. The creator goddesses of creation's power level was far too inconceivable. This completely surpassed any possibility of victory. Was this the reason why the game's history ended with everyone dying? Relax. She won't be able to return. There's no concept of space or time in the void. Only one's will can guide one's direction. Pure power is worthless. A physical body that can't be controlled by a divine soul can only remain where it is. Even if she's right in front of you, she'll still be far away. And soon, that physical body will naturally collapse. The sealed Hell's Maw seemed to be explaining my system's explanation. Cynthia's physical body didn't improve any further even after the entire sky was sealed. And so, the Battle of the Hades came to an end. That's right, it had come to an end. There was nothing else left that was worth recording. Sophocles the Deceiver was a bastard who had been tempted by Cynthia's promises of great benefits to the point that he tore apart the ceasefire agreement. The moment that I and Cavendish appeared and the Lord of Lies woke up from his slumber, Sophocles unhesitatingly signed an even harsher ceasefire agreement. As for us, even if we were displeased, we didn't want to push the main gods too far at this point in time. 2 of the 7 infernos were still being rebuilt. The completion of the Hades would be delayed by at least 1 or 2 years. If we destroyed one more, we would suffer even more losses. And the longer the Hades were delayed by 1 day, the situation in the mortal plane would be even worse. Chaos War God Donades. Cavendish ran over and said something to Donades, and they seemed to have come to an agreement. And so, the true battle became a battle to the death. Donades was addicted to fighting, and it would seem that he intended to use his actions to force Donades to his limit. Judging by this, I guessed that Cavendish and Donades had long since been in cahoots with each other. At the very least, Donades' most loyal lackey of chaos actually seemed delighted after hearing about Cynthia's death. Even though we had come to an agreement, we still didn't hide our distrust of Donades and Donades. The 3 chaos main gods were all under our supervision. The demons were all waking up from their slumber, and the Queen of Temptations hid in Cavendish's embrace under the gazes of her comrades. Then, there were even more looks of dissatisfaction. I definitely wasn't envious or jealous of Donades. Stars also appeared in the sky above the Hades. The gods also began doing their jobs. Even the stars were spinning above the Chaos main gods' heads. Everyone was still looking at the Chaos main gods with a lack of trust in them. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief when the white figure on the boat reappeared on the river Styx. At this point, we no longer had to worry about the Chaos main gods causing trouble. Ale, you've woken up. It was likely that even I had unknowingly become dependent on this figure. The black pillar that represented death and souls rose up once again. The pillar of ice, pillar of death, pillar of holy light, and pillar of law supported the entire Hades. The cycle of the Hades had now been completed, and the completion rate had greatly increased. Donades and Sophocles the Deceiver would remain in the world of the Hades. That was something that could only be done when the world of Ache and the world of the Hades were reconnected. Only then would they have a place to return to. Of course, there would always be a powerful force watching over them. If they showed any weakness, it would be the perfect time for them to die. At the very least, they definitely wouldn't have an easy time for the next few years. When the two towers completed Cavendish's task, Cavendish unhesitatingly dragged the pitifully screaming goddess into the void. His unhesitating footsteps and his final smile when he turned around told me that the next time we met, he would be even more powerful than he was now. At this point, the Battle of the Hades ended with the Hades faction's complete victory. History was now destined to be completely different. The future world would change from 2 factions fighting for supremacy to 3 factions fighting for supremacy. Perhaps everyone's fates would be different. As time passed, the 7 rulers of Hell revived one by one and ascended to the throne. The 4 halls of the Hades all began operating, and the devils diligently carried out their duties. A new cycle of reincarnation began. When the first baby was born in the land of spring, everyone, including the gods, was overjoyed. Our cycle of reincarnation had succeeded. Of course, other people told me about this later. After all, when I cancelled my reverse god's descent with Womians, I naturally fell into an eternal slumber. As the pillar of law of the Hades, Womians would truly become an independent existence. After the Hades was completed, he was the embodiment of justice and selflessness, so he would naturally lose the concept of self. Womians had already transformed into the order of the Hades. The god of law and Hades was destined to become the strongest god in all the dimensions. However, this no longer had anything to do with me. The Hades had already been completed, and all the bugs would automatically be fixed. There would no longer be any need to consider the so-called god's descent anymore. Womians would become an independent existence. As for me, I had also obtained my freedom. At the very least, the Armageddon that was destined to be on my shoulders could now be removed. I could finally relax and enjoy a happy life. What? The future would still be harsh? This world didn't belong to me alone to begin with. It was probably more than enough that I had done so much and avoided total annihilation. I could leave the rest to the mortals. The gods of the Hades would help them overcome this difficult time. However, history and fate had already been completely rewritten. The amount of fate points I obtained from this would definitely be astronomical. There was also the god equipment that would definitely drop after I killed a main god. Unfortunately, my system still hadn't completed the final calculation even before I fell into an eternal slumber. Before I truly closed my eyes and fell into an eternal slumber, my system's next sentence made me feel rather uneasy. It seems that we've all been played by Cavendish. Cynthia's death will not only affect the Chaos Abyss, but the death of a main god will also weaken the entire dimensional barrier. It'll be even easier for dimensional invaders to enter. Our future won't be easy. Alright then, it was fortunate that I hadn't listened to him about killing off the 2 creator goddesses. Wouldn't that have directly caused the dimensional barrier to shatter and caused a major dimensional war? The Chaos faction would probably have a great time fighting, as they would have even more opportunities to evolve. However, the entire world would probably be on the verge of collapse as it faced an unknown future. Cavendish, you're making me suffer again. Chapter 478. Things change every day these days. I really can't understand it. Yesterday, I heard that the Sala Duchy is at war again, and the price of food is going to skyrocket. Today, I heard that the drool invented a new crop, and the price of food plummeted. I had Carlo go to the neighboring town and pull a cart full of food, but he sold it before it even reached the warehouse. Behind the bar, old man Barton was wiping the plates while complaining that the world was changing so quickly that he, a retired warrior, could no longer understand it. It was already night, and it was raining cats and dogs outside. The raindrops pattered against the wooden windows and roof, and the heavy rain hit against the wine barrel sign of the bar, causing it to sway. The dim yellow oil lamp inside slightly illuminated the lobby of the Rhino Tavern. The half-elf bard was softly reciting a new war epic from a remote area, and the adventurers were quietly listening. Not only did this terrible weather make them have no plans to go out, but they also didn't have the mood to be as noisy as they used to be. Warming themselves by the fire, listening to music, and playing Gwent cards was already the most extravagant enjoyment. Ha, old Barton, it's not that I want to criticize you, but it's fine if you can't afford that machine that makes a sound just by shaking it. Nowadays, magic lamps are sold everywhere, and they only cost 2 energy coins a month. Why are you still using kerosene lamps that use up so much fuel and aren't bright? Are you still lacking these few coins in your coffin? Or are you planning to take advantage of Catalina's future husband? Even though Catalina was the bar girl, she was also the boss's precious adopted daughter, and she was the fuse that could be lit at any time. If anyone else had said this in front of old Barton, he would have taught them a lesson a long time ago. This old dog still had some teeth. At this moment, the person who was joking casually was an old mercenary with gray eyebrows and hair. His silver emblem was engraved with a pair of wings. This was the emblem of a silver emblem mercenary. Only warriors who had made great contributions to the duchy had the chance to obtain it, and it was also proof of being an ace mercenary. It was clearly a waste of talent to be in a small town like this. His expensive magic spear was casually leaning against the bar counter, and on his arm, which was toasting to his heart's content, was the latest Explorer X4 Hero's Gauntlet, and on his waist were several of the latest miniature energy barrels. These were the standard equipment of Winston, the strongest mercenary in Anton. And the reason why he was able to joke around with old Barton like this and not get thrown out by the hot-tempered old warrior was that the two of them used to be partners in the same mercenary group. Humph, I see that these engineers and mages aren't reliable. Can their things be trusted? Especially gnomes. Hey, you can't be. Do you still remember how you were screwed over by the goblin engineer? The other party sold you out that mechanical alarm clock. Oh right. That's right, it's that mechanical clock. I still remember its auspicious name. It's called, what's it called again? Safe, the BR Brothers Safe Alarm Clock. Old Barton spat out these names one at a time. He still remembered the name of the producer, and it was obvious that he held a grudge. His memory was exceptionally deep. I remember again. That day, the alarm clock rang for almost half an hour, and we were all woken up. You were still hugging your pillow and drooling while saying let me sleep for 5 more minutes, and then, seeing old Barton's deathly pale face, and seeing the red-haired waitress eavesdrop by wiping the table, old Winston decided to save his old friend some face, considering that this bar was the only one in town that served dwarven spirits. Crack. Alright, the old baldy crushed the plate himself. It was obvious that he remembered what happened that morning, and he lost control of the strength in his hand. Old Winston laughed so hard that he slumped over the table. At the end of the alarm clock's ringing, it gave a warning. It was a hoarse and ear-piercing recording. Even now, old Barton could still clearly remember that it was the sharp voice of a gnome. "Alright, you don't want to get up, but you actually look down on the safe alarm clock, the BR Brothers Goblin product. This alarm clock is angry. This alarm clock is about to explode." 54-9. The 50-second countdown was more than enough for the muddle-headed old warrior. Considering the gnome's reputation, if they said they would blow up a hole, they definitely wouldn't just blow up a hole. They could only blow up a dozen holes, or even a canyon. The old warrior didn't hesitate to get out of bed and press the stop button on the alarm clock. And then, 4-2-4-1 obviously, this wasn't the stop button for the alarm clock bomb, and even after old Barton thoroughly searched through the alarm clock, he still couldn't find a second button to press. 3-2, then, helpless, Barton could only painfully throw out the crappy thing I bought with a month's salary that was about to turn into a bomb. In the end, when the countdown ended, what he waited for wasn't an explosion, but another music recording. "Ha, did you fall for it? You're finally awake, aren't you? Don't listen to those rumors. Our safe alarm clock is sturdy and reliable. We stopped making bombs a long time ago." Alright, if this was the end of the matter, then so be it. After all this ruckus, he didn't need to sleep anymore. Perhaps old Barton would even appreciate the other party's sense of humor. The alarm clock really did work. Just as he took back the alarm clock, he discovered that a small crack had been smashed open on the alarm clock, and the hidden mechanism had been activated once again. "Ha, you actually dared to pry into the BR Brothers' trade secrets. Taste the gnome's wrath." Barton still remembered that the high-pitched scream was filled with undisguised malice, and the wings of misfortune had already covered his head. Asterisk boom. Asterisk alright, there was no need to describe this familiar plot. The explosion wasn't that powerful, and old Barton wasn't that weak, but since the source of the explosion was right in front of him, the last few strands of hair and eyebrows of poor old Barton dissipated in the explosion. Then, he angrily ran over to question those green misers with no professional ethics. However, the gnome contract specialist received him in a refined manner, and then chatted with him in a friendly and cordial manner. And so, first, he was confused by the large number of disclaimers hidden in the sales contract, and then he inexplicably had to pay some liquidated damages and fines for prying into trade secrets. In the end, the more he thought about it, the more he went to the gnome's door. Instead, he was inexplicably tricked into buying a large number of hair growth products. "Pfft, you don't say. Those hair growth products of yours are really effective." Asterisk crack. Asterisk this was the second time that old man Barton had crushed a plate. He was already considering whether or not he should properly settle the score with his old friend. At the very least, when he woke up the next day and turned into a hairy ball, this old bastard was also smiling just as happily, and even dragged his friend to see the hairy gorilla. Alright, it was no wonder that Barton hated gnome products so much. Back in the day, he bought a new toy for the sake of novelty. In the end, he didn't even pay for it, and he was tormented quite badly. His hair did grow back, but it was too frightening. In the end, he even had to spend money to buy the gnome's permanent hair loss agent. It was as if he had stepped into a pit one after another. In the end, he, the rock-heavy hammer, retired early. It was unknown whether it was because he was really old and weak like he said, or because he couldn't stand the ridicule of his brothers and the strange gazes of others. After all, not everyone could remain calm on a face that was as clean as an egg. Every time the people in front of him inexplicably burst into laughter, his old face couldn't stay there any longer. Right? Has the permanent hair loss agent lost its effectiveness? How did your eyebrows grow? No way, fake eyebrows? Isn't that another goblin product? Old friend, don't you hate goblin products? Asterisk boom. Asterisk alright, this time, the old friend directly pulled out the war hammer that he had placed under the bar counter. He waved the silver weapon around and chased the blabbermouthed silver emblem mercenary all over the bar. As for the regular customers of the bar, they were already used to this daily clamor. They cheered the boss on while requesting the bard to change to a fast-paced song. Those who stayed in a bar instead of a warm home in this horrible weather were either adventurers or mercenaries who had no fixed abode, or old drunkards who were hopelessly poisoned by alcohol. Unfortunately, unlike the previous times when the boss won a complete victory, this time, old Barton panted heavily as he chased Winston for a dozen or so laps. He suddenly stopped and looked thoughtfully at Winston, who was completely fine. "You old bastard? You've reached the threshold of the legend rank?" "Yeah, I just touched it 2 days ago. I came all the way here just to show off to you." Hearing this, Barton was stunned at first, but his tightly clenched fists relaxed once more. They had been brothers for so many years, so there was no need to take him seriously. It was just an effective way of provoking him, and even though his old friend took the opportunity to invite him to come out of retirement again, he still gave the same answer. Even this guy can become a legend. This damn world, this old bastard can't understand it anymore. It's easier to just stay here and run a bar. It seemed that Winston's persuasion had failed again. The old mercenary shrugged. This was to be expected. Barton the Stubborn Rock was a nickname that said he was as stubborn as a rock. "You old bastard, you're only 45 years old. Don't call me an old bastard. Did you hear? The wood spirits have started selling their holy water of youth. It only costs 100 justice points, and that's 2 years of youth. Who knows, you might even become a legend." Not interested. If you say such nonsense again, next time your dwarven thunder spirit will only have water and no wine. This was obviously not empty talk, but a real threat. Sensing that his old friend was really angry, Winston shook his head and lowered his head to focus on drinking. It was no wonder that old Barton was so resistant to new magical equipment. This world was changing too quickly. There were many people like him who couldn't adapt. In fact, if it weren't for certain reasons, Winston would have already reached the age of retirement according to past practice. Old Winston was already over 48 years old. Under normal circumstances, a human warrior would be at their peak around 35 years old. After 40 or so, all aspects of the body would rapidly deteriorate. If they couldn't enter the gold rank by then, they could forget about it for the rest of their lives. But with the arrival of the Great Era, with the help of the crazily rising elemental tide and all sorts of precious resources obtained from the contract hero system, not only did he enter the gold rank in just 2 years, he even reached the threshold of legend in his 7th year. And so, while he was pleasantly surprised, the old man was also tempted. He ambitiously hoped to pull his old friend out of retirement again. But unfortunately, while some people were happy because of the arrival of the Great Era, others always faced changes in their worldview and were unable to adapt. Yes, the Great Era, the New Dawn Era, FT. Although most people were still used to using the old calendar AD 1905, as the Church of Law and the Church of Hades expanded day by day, the Dawn Era they advocated was accepted by more and more people. And now, it was already the 7th year of the new era, FT7. The people of HE were getting more and more used to this new world that constantly refreshed their worldview. That's right, even the term worldview was spread by the Church of Law. In the past few years, there had been too many such new concepts and terms. In the past few years, as the elemental tide rose, the number of spellcaster talents that were rarely seen in the past had increased tenfold. Even a pure warrior like Winston had inexplicably learned a few magical sword techniques. He had even considered selling off the antiques in his house and replacing them with a real magical long spear. In the past few years, the silver rank, which was the limit for mortals in the past, had been broken. Gold rank masters suddenly became worthless. In fact, even the number of legends had become so numerous that the people of the world were thinking of reconsidering how they should be addressed. Of course, these new powerhouses who didn't even know their own path and didn't even have a soul imprint were far weaker than the veteran powerhouses. but enough numbers could make up for everything. In the past few years, the map could be rewritten 3 times a week. Dimensional invaders and dimensional cracks were as common as cockroaches. It was disgusting. The entire plane could be said to have sunk into the chaos of war. If it wasn't for the fact that the population of the mortal plane had greatly increased, this world might have already been beyond salvation. In the past few years, the technological revolution that had started in the Northlands had become more and more intense. Magical engineering technology had already changed the lives of mortals and the normal state of war. Ordinary families now had magical lamps, and mortal warriors had begun experimenting with magical swords and magic spears. New transportation equipment made trading of goods easier and faster. Armies and armies had even begun a magical mechanization revolution. Winston, who had adapted to the changes of the times, had already gone further and further. If he still insisted on his old lifestyle like old Barton, he was probably destined to be eliminated. In the past few years there had been countless changes. No one could be sure if this was a good or bad thing. But no matter what the changes were, life had to continue. Gold had to be earned, land had to be farmed, and wine had to be drunk. Some things were gone forever, but some things were still the same as before. Ding. Crack. The sudden sound of the doorbell interrupted old Barton's reminiscence. The 3 cloaked figures who entered attracted his attention. Their soaked cloaks caused rainwater to drip onto the floor, and their heavy anti-skid rain boots made clacking noises as they stepped on the floor. Traveling in this kind of weather wasn't something most people wanted to do. The owner glanced at them, then lowered his head and focused on his work. No matter what, they were just new customers. As long as they didn't cause trouble, he would still welcome them. Hey, look! That black skin and the inverted cross emblem. It's the anti-holy knight. Silver scales and black skulls holy emblem? And there's an important figure from the Church of Law? What are they doing in our rural area? Wow, a silver cross sword? 3 holes in the magic box. That should be the newest model of magic swords, right? Didn't they say that they weren't for sale for the Northlands' military use? Could it be those fellows from the Northlands? But after taking off their waterproof cloaks, they attracted the attention of all the customers. A combination of a dark elf, a human, and a gnome wasn't common. The instant the owner saw the gnome, he decided to add 50% water to the wine and double the price of the dishes. Then, he arranged for the gnome to stay in the empty room where the person who died 2 days ago had died. Perhaps it could even exorcise evil. But the 3 new customers didn't seem to have any intention of ordering food. Instead, they walked directly to the notice board in the middle of the bar. That was the place where mercenaries in the town were issued employment missions. The gnome from the Church of Law tiptoed and tore down one of the wanted posters, only to paste another one on it. At first, the others were looking on with interest, looking forward to the mission of these important figures. But when they saw the new wanted poster, they all shook their heads and went back to what they were doing. After all, no matter how attractive the reward was, a mission that was impossible to complete was meaningless. This mission had been on the wanted list from FT5 to FT7. Not only was there no news at all, but if they had only found him based on the vague information on the wanted poster, they would have long since become the world's top detective. Wanted poster, Roland. Gender, male, age, 5 to 60 years old. Hair color, blonde, possibly dyed. Height, uncertain. No obvious characteristics on the body. Appearance, unknown, usually looks weak, but could be in disguise. Immune to all detection spells. Might have a black cat or other ghostly things by his side. Might be a warrior or a holy knight. There's also the possibility of a law job, necromancer, ice mage. Of course, he could also be in disguise as another job. That guy could do it. Strength rating, unknown. Please form a team with any job class below legend rank. As long as he's alive, we'll be troubled if he dies again. Right? He doesn't have a sense of humor at all. He only knows how to tell cold jokes. Alright then, so people could die again after they died. It would be a miracle if they could find Roland on this wanted poster that incited everyone's desire to comment. Still, many people were tempted and took action. After all, the rewards were far too tempting. Reward: 2 million gold coins, 50,000 justice points, friendship with the Mist Alliance, the Church of Law and Hades, the Absolute Gentleman Mercenary Group, and a request that doesn't violate basic morals. Gold coins and justice points could only be used to move powerful individuals, but the current Mist Alliance had already transformed from a small border country into a mega empire. The Church of Law and Hades was the Mist Alliance's official religion, as well as one of the strongest churches in the world. And after the Absolute Gentleman Mercenary Group's core members suddenly returned 2 years ago, they were now unquestionably the #1 mercenary group in the world. Their friendship and one request was more than enough to move an entire country. Obviously, these 3 esteemed guests weren't here to look for Roland. After all, finding Roland had mysteriously become one of the 10 most difficult epic-ranked quests to complete in the world by the fairies. They were simply here to update this wanted poster that had already been posted all over the world. This time, apart from increasing the reward from 2 million to 3 million and increasing the amount of justice points from 50,000 to 80,000, there was also a new sentence added at the end of the wanted poster. Roland, if you don't voluntarily turn yourself in within 1 year, we'll publicize all the treasures on the A17 bookshelf in your underground library. The fairies will prepare a special issue just for you. Everyone else glanced at the wanted poster and immediately left. However, a drunkard named Caro, who lived in a bar for a long time, was shocked awake. He was so shocked that his signature beard almost fell to the ground. A17. Isn't that an erotic novel that I wrote based on real people? There's even my special hardcore Pointillist drawings. Marguerite, Eliza, Harlois, they'll kill me. Bastard. There's even one for me. You even dared to do something to a banshee back in the day. Cough, a ghost story is a classic theme. There's plenty of ways to play it. Let go, don't bite me. Actually, there are almost all the beautiful female goddesses on the list. You're going to be hunted down by the goddesses after the list is publicized, right? Humph, I'm not angry because the goddess of order isn't on the list. Hey. It's not appropriate for you to act like a tsundere at such a time. Tui, don't talk to me, you old virgin. Harlois, let me tell you, an old virgin who's been holding back for too long can be quite perverted. Roland has lived for more than 300 years and has long since reached the point of no stoop. His story about you is quite a classic. Even I can't understand how he came up with such a story. It's a combination of sadomasochism, hardcore, and icy love, surpassing any other work of his, my dear Astria. Are you hungry? I'll cook some noodles for you. Chapter 479. Carlo. Last name and age unknown. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a full beard that obscures his face, but his voice sounds younger than his appearance. I don't know when he appeared in the Rhino Bar, but he's been there for almost half a year. He's good at cheating, nicknamed Tavern God of Gamblers. He never does any serious work, and his main income is the money he wins from gambling with adventurers. He's especially good at Gwent, Hearthstone, and other cards. As for why he's good at cheating, it's because he wins and loses in the process of playing cards with him. In the end, you'll definitely be the one who loses, but because the process is thrilling and interesting, he doesn't lose much each time. There are always some bored people who are willing to give him money. But he was too ruthless in killing outsiders some time ago, so the old drunkards all discovered his trick. He won't be able to make any money for a while. Usually, he does odd jobs for the boss, old Barton, to pay for alcohol and accommodation. It seems that he's very interested in the owner's daughter, Catalina, but she's never been nice to him. Looking at the information he bought from the local thieves' guild, the Goblin Inquisitor Saul shook his head. Over the past half a year, It had become a habit for him to inquire about unknown adventurers who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. But when he thought of that person's information, that metal that seemed to have become an epic character, and compared it to the drunkard in front of him who had been in the tavern for half a year, he shook his head. It seemed that his luck wasn't good enough, and he still came up empty this time. Next, let's prepare for the investigation mission in front of us. Such a remote town without any special resources, but there's actually a blood sacrifice of evil cultists. Something's not right there. As an inquisitor who had just graduated from Nanxiang's accelerated course, Saul seemed too young to be on the front lines. If it were those old foxes from the era of the Four Halls of Justice, seeing Carlo's information, they would immediately be interested, because they knew that their old superior, who sounded like he was famous, was definitely not some honorable hero. It was completely possible for him to owe a tavern money for half a year, or use gambling debts to pay for alcohol. However, if it was really those wily old foxes, they wouldn't even think about looking for someone, because they knew that not only was it impossible to complete this mission, but even if they were lucky enough to complete it, it might not be a good thing. First of all, if that person really wanted to hide, it would depend entirely on luck to find him. Even if he really bumped into him, not only would he be able to escape, he wouldn't even be able to stop him. And even if he was lucky enough to catch him, no matter how good the reward was, it wouldn't be enough to stop that person's vicious revenge. No matter how one looked at it, it was a trap for them to win or lose such a mission. Thus, for the wily old foxes of the Church of Law, the Find Roland mission was just an interesting topic for idle chatter. Only the newly minted youngsters would take their superiors' number one mission seriously. Of course, they naturally became the targets of the wily old foxes. This legend was still being spread among the recruits of the Church of Law, the Gentleman's Alliance, and the Mist Kingdom's Knight Corps. Go find the legendary hero Roland. Our church is longing for his return. This is a test for youngsters. As long as you find him, you will receive his recognition, grudge, and reward, revenge. You will also receive the world's one and only 10th circle incantation, the ultimate shoe imprisonment spell, literal meaning. Saul, who had only been on the job for 2 months and had just completed a mission by himself, was obviously the target who was being fooled. He also completely believed it, or else he wouldn't have carried the newest wanted poster with him. What Saul didn't know was that they, who had only been in the Rhino Tavern for a day, had already been seen through by the target they were looking for. In one of the tavern's rooms, they were currently being discussed by their target. Silver-ranked Inquisitor, gold-ranked Anti-Knight, and 4 elemental swordcasters. The one leading them should be that Anti-Knight. They're missing a Holy Knight to form the most popular 4-plate armor combination. Together, they should be able to take care of a high-level demon. Judging from their target, they should be here to investigate the Death Council that has been getting more and more rampant lately. Whenever the world encountered danger, the first to rampage wasn't the enemy, but rather the messy evil cults. They used the world's turmoil and the fear in the hearts of the people to wantonly spread their own beliefs, creating even more panic and chaos for their own benefits. However, there were gods and demons in this world, so the organizers of evil cults weren't limited to just mortals. If the mastermind behind the scenes was pulled out from the gutter, it would most likely be related to some big shot from the lower planes or other planes. The full name of the Death Council was All Things Die Council. It was a religion that came from the lower planes that worshipped death itself. However, when it spread to the main plane, it had already gone astray. The current religion was, all life will perish in the Armageddon. Only by transforming into undead creatures can one survive the Armageddon. Doesn't that make people speechless? In fact, I've seen many more evil cults that are even more outrageous than this. Just by looking at this religion, I can guarantee that this evil cult definitely had something to do with those undead emperors. Following the successful descent of that undead emperor a year ago, the undead calamity in the main plane was indeed becoming more and more intense. Those fellows from the Death Council were also becoming more and more rampant. If I left them alone, it was possible that a village would become a dead village after some time. The undead calamity would also gain new troops, and it was even possible that plagues and dimensional doors leading to the undead planes would appear. That was why whenever the Death Council appeared, the gods' churches and countries would often send out investigators to clean them up. In the game's history, there were also quite a few evil cults that appeared. No matter what their initial goal was, their final goal was to create all sorts of blood sacrifices and evil rituals in order to attract the big shots of the Chaos Abyss to come to this plane and start a holy war. And after the will of the Chaos Abyss disappeared, the Chaos Lords and evil gods obtained freedom and became more and more active. Evil cults also increased in number. However, it was difficult to say what their final goal was. At the very least, I hadn't seen so many strange evil cults in the game's history. Fishermen die. It was a rather strange name. It was said that this evil cult believed that fish are the purest creatures, and that all fishermen should die. Those bastards who cooked fish soup should go to the 18th level of hell. Their main worshippers were fishmen and water-type creatures. They developed quite well in swamps and lakes. At first, I felt that this was quite inconceivable. But when I found out that the person behind this evil cult was the son of the person who had been cooked into fish soup, I suddenly felt that it was understandable. For the sake of world peace, let's cook less fish soup. I mysteriously felt a resonance with this cult's teachings, especially when I heard that Cavendish felt that his failure was rather embarrassing, so he went back to the same old location to fish several times and cook fish soup several times. This caused the Chaos Abyss's leader to change several times. I felt even more sympathy for this evil cult that had unknowingly changed its backer several times. Right, among all the evil cults, there was one called the Church of Bliss that was especially attention-grabbing. Their teachings were, "The end of the world is right in front of us. Let's throw away all our unnecessary morals and pour all our limited energy into endless sex." It was said that all the priests of this evil cult were young and beautiful girls, and that their sacrificial activities were something to be envied. I mean evil and depraved. There were even quite a few cute elven girls among the participants. It was said that the leader behind this cult came from a certain level of the Chaos Abyss, and that he created this evil cult out of pure interest. He also used his own incarnation to participate in such activities, and it was said that the incarnation was a very attractive girl. Unfortunately, I had never been able to find their church. Ahem, would you believe me if I said that I only want to eradicate the evil church? If I tell you that the day you find the Elysium Club is the day Eliza finds you, I will never tell anyone about it. Do you believe me? I'd be a fool to believe you. Same here. Now that I was all alone, I was being ridiculed by the soul-bound silly cat. You won't consider going back? Humph, even if the reward is 10 times higher, I will still. You won't be tempted. No, find someone to help me kidnap him and take the reward. I'll run after I get the reward. Don't you have the pride of an epic hero? Did you know that the undying Roland has already been named one of the top 10 epic heroes of the past 1,000 years by the fairies? Pride? Can it be eaten? Can it be exchanged for alcohol? Of course, ridiculing me was one thing. As for me, I actually had my own thoughts as well. Leave the affairs of mortals to the mortals. I've already done so much. If they still can't deal with me, they'll be too useless. Before entering the underworld, I had already thought things through very clearly. My subordinates have long since reached the age where they can take charge of their own affairs. If an old fellow like me were to constantly point here and there, it would instead hinder their growth. We've already endured for more than 5 years. If something were to happen, it would have happened long ago. Since everything is fine, it means that the youngsters are quite capable. As an old fellow who retired long ago, there's no need for me to jump out at such a time to annoy others. There might even be people who say that I'm trying to seize power. The world was huge. What could an individual's combat strength change? The changes that could be made had already been made. The seeds that had been sown had already sprouted. All that was left was anticipation. Yep, not laziness, but anticipation. Do your best, mortal. Big Brother is watching over you. That was why I had more than enough confidence to ignore the existence of the wanted order. It was just that the newest threat was giving me a headache. Considering that Eliza was most likely involved in the matter of being able to enter my underground library, I decided to take some time to write a threatening letter to the Church of Law. If she dared to publicize it, I would publicize the embarrassing fact that she still wet her bed at 6 years old, and that she still didn't dare to sleep alone at 9 years old. I suddenly sympathize with Eliza. Can't you have a little more EQ and a little more sense of responsibility? Actually, none of you understand the depth of my love. Child, one day, my life will come to an end, and all of you will be crowned as kings, kings, kings. Who's throwing stinky boots at me? I didn't even get to finish saying the word king before the white cat's flying boots shattered it. Yep, the white cat. I thought that the silly cat had become the white cat because of that ridiculous wanted order. Aren't you just planning to openly slack off? What's the point of coming up with so many excuses? Humph, mortal wisdom. How can you casually say something like slacking off? You should say that you trust your companions and juniors. Also, please call me Roland, the Freedom Knight who pursues justice and fairness. I'm an independent knight who travels with the wind. I'm not loyal to any noble faction, and I only fight for the justice in my heart. Why do I feel like you're ridiculing me again for no reason? Humph, I'm a man who wants to become a Freedom Knight. One day, I'll find my own elven girl. I have no idea what you're talking about. Did you take the wrong medicine? This joke is way too revealing of your age. Be careful that others don't understand, however. Time seemed to have proven my choice. My wish from 7 years ago had become a reality. Although it would be extremely irresponsible to leave someone else in charge, this opportunity to be independent indeed gave those talented people a chance to show off their abilities. The construction of the Hades took a total of 5 years. These 5 years were also the years when the Holy War began and the era changed the most rapidly. This was also a test for those young leaders. Even though I had just returned to the mortal world, I heard that they were doing quite well. The Mist Alliance in the Northlands was protected by 2 queens. The Northlands' Mist Sisters' reputation had spread far and wide. Since the entire world was in chaos and war, the Northlands' Mist Alliance that still had time to support other countries became especially special. The Northlands' Mist Alliance was flourishing, powerful, and just. The Northlands' Mist Alliance was becoming more and more prosperous. In this generation, the other side of being powerful and famous meant a stable living environment and endless business opportunities. Compared to the countries that were constantly suffering from the fires of war, the land that was covered in ice and snow seemed to be much more adorable. This was especially so with the development of magical engineering technology and the combined forbidden spells of the Northlands elves, which made the cruel natural environment seem less frightening. In a world of chaos and war, having a peaceful land was an attractive advantage. Countless merchants and people migrated here. The tremendous profits from the arms trade, plus the strong alliance with Åland, Bardi, and other countries helped the Mist Alliance, which no longer had to worry about the future, to become a new mega-empire. The Mist Alliance was now viewed as a new mega-empire. Of course, the Mist Alliance was able to maintain peace in the midst of war. Apart from the fact that the Mist Alliance had no value, it was also because this was the headquarters of the Church of Law and the Hades. Causing trouble here would be the equivalent of directly provoking the entire Hades faction. Even the Chaos main gods would have to think twice before acting. The internal structure of the Church of Law was stable. In fact, they didn't even need an especially outstanding leader. And with the establishment of the Hades, the god of law had transformed into a concrete church of Hades. The saying that anyone who did evil in life would be punished in death was no longer an empty saying. As the church of law and the god of Hades, it was only natural that they would become more and more influential. The foundational reason for their increasing influence was the rise of the Hades faction and the fact that Womians had become a main god. As the ruler of the Hades, after the Hades fully matured, the eternally just Womians absorbed countless believers and the power of law, becoming the second existence to become a main god in this holy war. Meanwhile, the Hades faction had become a neutral third party with at least 5 main gods. Even though most of these main gods were unable to leave the Hades faction, they were still a real threat. Perhaps it was precisely because of this astonishing power that the Order gods, who were already in endless trouble, didn't turn against the Order gods. They still maintained a faintly discernible cooperative relationship with the Hades faction, which allowed the Chaos main gods to actively avoid the Northlands. At least for now, the 3 factions seemed to have reached a balance. Even if this balance was destined to be torn apart by one faction, it still gave He and the others more time to prepare and adapt. The god of law, who successfully became a main god, also helped the law job class members to become even stronger. Due to the activity of law believers and law job class members, their teachings were becoming more and more popular in war-torn areas. Neutrality, non-aggression, instant learning, and other job class characteristics tempted many countries that lacked combat strength and public security. Some countries even chose to accept the laws of the Holy Scriptures as proof of governance. Law schools with extremely low barriers were also established in various countries. Law job class members who were eternally on the side of good also began to become popular among adventurers who leaned more towards justice. Of course, if a team always walked on the edge of the law, a just knight would be far more dangerous than a holy knight. If one didn't want to become a former knight, then law job class members would have to adhere to the laws themselves. The law job class didn't have high requirements for one's education level and combat talent. Nor did law job class members require large amounts of resources and money like other job classes. The law job class's most important aspect was whether or not the law job class would be able to adhere to the laws to protect themselves and others. The incredibly low barrier to entry caused law job class members to become more and more numerous. Many guards in remote towns could also be seen trying to become self-taught by law. The Absolute Gentleman Alliance received endless news, with some good and some bad. The best news was that 2 years ago, when the Hades and the mortal plane were re-established, a large number of powerful mercenaries and knights returned to the mortal plane. The worst news was that a certain Draken inconceivably reached semi-god rank and even obtained the abnormal title of Mother of All Beasts. It's fine if he successfully reached semi-god rank. I wouldn't be surprised no matter what that bastard does. I can understand if he's the king of all beasts, but what does Mother of All Beasts mean? Forget it, there's no need to tell me the answer. At any rate, he's definitely some blind idiot. That's why this news is only bad news. He created some evil cults and spread some new belief. He actually has quite a few believers. Yep, I won't go into the specifics. All you need to know is that he successfully entered the top 10 of the Calamity rankings and became the target of every country's assassination. It would seem that leaving him in the mortal plane to help manage the overall situation back then was definitely a mistake. There were far too many changes that could be described in one night. Although there was plenty of good news, it was nothing compared to the tremendous changes in the entire world. Countless historical heroes had stepped onto the stage that belonged to them. War became the cruelest cradle of all. Many influences caused the entire world's direction to become uncertain. This was also why old Barton complained that he couldn't keep up with the times. Of course, none of this had much to do with me. Right now, my goal was to enjoy life, slack off, and have fun. Just like those students who had finally passed their college entrance exams and survived that living hell, I had already completed my mission. Even if the sky collapsed, let me have fun first. Caro, you're so bored talking to a cat. Did you steal some alcohol to drink again? I'll give you a small mission to earn some alcohol money. These lords are investigating a case in town. You're familiar with the area, so help them guide you. What? Chapter 480. The investigation quickly entered a difficult situation. Judge Saul fell into deep thought as he faced a large pile of information in front of him. He constantly recalled the information he gathered in the morning and finally made his final judgment. There's only one truth. That murderer is the most unlikely one. Yep, it's me. I'm the investigator. The young Saul wore thick glasses. He gently pushed them up and something seemed to flash. His wise gaze had already pierced through countless obstacles and directly pointed out the truth. Wait, something doesn't seem right. As if even he himself felt that this conclusion was absurd, he hurriedly took out his work manual and searched for the working rules that he should follow at this time. His two companions exchanged glances and shook their heads helplessly. After exchanging their gazes, the dark elf Knight Tiana directly spoke up. Forget it, I'll do the investigation. Originally, it was because you're a judge, the rest of the sentence didn't need to be said. It was already rare for a dark elf to show some mockery, and it was also rare to see a goblin with a green face blush. To think that such a pure goblin existed in this world. It was a rare treasure. On the other side, even though it was only through Harlois's little trick of spying on Saul, I already had the urge to cover my face and cry. This was simply embarrassing for me. How could such a clown be sent to handle a case on his own? The military police? The political commissar? There's a traitor here. This is the person you brought out? This is the kind of trash your court and law school brought out? The silly cat didn't disappoint me and added insult to injury. However, I could more or less guess why he would make such an outrageous decision. In a way, it really did have something to do with me. Don't misunderstand, I definitely wouldn't write a stupid rule like, if the murderer can't be found, the investigator will be the murderer in my work manual. He should be a student of the crash course. There is indeed a clause in the case handbook that says suspecting everyone is the best solution to avoid logical blind spots, but he obviously misunderstood it. Either he was fooled by his seniors, or clap. In his panic, Saul accidentally dropped another small book on the ground. The bookmarks scattered all over the floor. However, the title of the book made me feel helpless, Forever Detective Coco by Roland. Either that or I've been poisoned by those damned detective novels. Stop complaining. I know this is my own doing. How would I know which idiot would make such nonsense out of boredom into the Roland series? This is just an entertaining detective novel. It's just for entertainment. Professionals shouldn't take it seriously. You even put in bookmarks and notes to use as a reference book. The ever-just Womians. Hurry up and drag this idiot back to the furnace to be reforged. I can't take it anymore. Mary, the 4 elemental swordsman, couldn't stand it anymore. She picked up the novel helplessly. She and Knight Tiana were already old partners. This time, they had to investigate the hidden Death Council. Considering that they might need the assistance of a law profession, they had requested assistance from their superiors. In the end, they had been sent such a useless person. Isn't this a novel? But didn't the seniors say that when we encounter a case that is too complicated, we can find inspiration from this novel? This was the work of that lord. I've learned more than 300 ways to murder. I think I hit the wall, really. You've encountered those strange and troublesome killing methods in real life? Would a normal person use such a troublesome method to resurrect? It's really just an entertainment novel. How does it feel to be so trusted by a junior? As expected, it's your own fault again. How does it feel? Right now, I really felt that I should have thrown these two into the Hades. I really couldn't take this double barrage. Tiana and Mary looked at each other. Nothing needed to be said. Alright, as expected, newbies aren't reliable. Don't count on it. Do it yourself. The two of them quickly organized the relevant information and began to talk about the case and the related parties. Goblin Sawyer also knew that he had embarrassed himself greatly this time, so he could only watch from the side. There were a total of 7 sacrifices in the 3 surrounding towns. Many of the victims' families were sacrificed. The total number of victims was 27. In the past 6 months there were 12 strangers. Among them, there were no guarantors or family members. Their actions were suspicious and obviously suspicious. The 2 female knight and swordsmen seemed to be in their 20s. I probably hadn't met them before. It was highly likely that they were only semi-newbies who had only been working for 2 or 3 years. However, they at least had the ability to organize files and information. But the owner of the bakery in the neighboring town is very suspicious. His wife was killed 3 months ago, but he didn't say anything. He wasn't sad at all. When we went to investigate, he kept staring at us. Yeah, I think so too. When we suddenly turned around after we left, he was still staring at us. That shifty look in his eyes told me that he wasn't a good person. Perhaps he had a guilty conscience. Let's add him to the list of suspects. The two of them had a lively discussion. Even Harloise was a little hesitant as she asked me, "Is that bakery owner really an evil cult member?" "No. As for why his wife wasn't sad, you haven't seen his wife before. She looks just like an enlarged version of a goblin. Every time old Mike gets drunk, he would cry about how he was forced onto the bridge by his wife's tyrannical daughter, and how he was beaten by his wife at home. I always felt that it was already very kind of him not to celebrate his wife's death with gongs and drums. Why was he staring at them? Wasn't it because he had a guilty conscience? With a wife like that, it's normal for him to be a pervert who sneaks glances at beautiful women. Besides, it's their fault for dressing like that without any self-awareness. Didn't you notice that all those young men are sneaking glances at them? If we add them to the list of suspects based on this standard, it'll probably be filled up immediately. In front of Mary's chest was the mercenary emblem of the Absolute Gentleman Alliance. She was also wearing a female outfit prepared for the 4 elemental swordcasters. The 4 elemental swordcasters were magical swordsmen and didn't need to wear heavy armor for the sake of flexibility. After all, they could wear very little, and the higher-ups of the Gentleman Alliance were all. Yeah, everyone understood. The outer layer was a silver enchanted chainmail. The inner layer was a skin-tight shirt that was specially woven to accentuate certain parts of the body. The long red and blue windbreaker covered the entire body. Not being able to see it was even more eye-catching than seeing it. Rather than calling it a warrior's armor, it was more like an evening dress for a ball. Overall, it was fashionable and modern, sexy yet not vulgar. It completely surpassed the aesthetic standards of this era, and was a rare masterpiece. As for the anti-knight, it was even more ridiculous. The elegant and beautiful silver armor covered most of the vital parts of the body, but revealed some unimportant parts, such as the absolute domain where the thighs and torso met. The arms revealed 2 fingers and elbows, the chest revealed the back of the neck, and the chest revealed the lower abdomen. The entire armor was completely different from the traditional barrel structure. However, the outer appearance of the armor made it seem like an elegant silver robot lady. The lines were elegant and gentle, and when paired with the parts that were revealed, coupled with the natural charm of the dark elves, it had a depraved sense of beauty. TSK, as expected of dark elves, daring to wear anything. Does this have nothing to do with you? The silly cat always had a sharp sense in strange places. How would I know that they would really make it? This set can be made into 2 sets of full body armor. Seriously. Waste. Well done, my friend. I did my best to give a thumbs up, and it was as if Adam's flashing smile appeared in the sky. Why did it have to be Adam? Because I had only shown those designs to Adam, and he was definitely in cahoots with those fellows from the Gentleman Alliance. He was probably the only one who could make the serious Diana decide on such an armor design. Why did it have to be an illusion in the sky? I didn't think that Marguerite would spare his life after making such an item. At this point, I was inexplicably looking forward to the uniforms of the female judge, law incantationer, and justice knight. But when I thought about how Lilith was probably in charge now, I felt an inexplicable sadness that made me feel somewhat disappointed. Wait a moment, Lilith's sexual orientation is a bit off. Perhaps it's a good thing. Getting back to the main topic, judging from the mithril and rare alloys used, this equipment wasn't just for the sake of aesthetic. Its performance definitely wouldn't be bad. At this moment, the two girls were still arguing about the suspects that they were talking about, while Harloise began guessing with great interest. They're talking about that middle-aged guard from our town? The one who always glares at them with hatred? No, he's just an old pervert. He's cross-eyed and looks at everything like he's glaring at someone. The auntie who washes clothes by the river is also a secret watcher. No, the others only want to ask where they bought their clothes, but they're too embarrassed to approach them. After all, in their eyes, these rookies are all important people. That little apprentice from the tailor's shop? Same reason. She wants to make 2 replicas and sell them for money. How do you know so much? They paid me to help them ask, and they sold the same information 7 or 8 times. They finally have money for today's drinks. You're so free. The guard of Phoenix Feather Town? He's always sneaking around the streets at night. He's a hunchback, and he's on night duty. Is it a crime to go shopping or take a stroll at night? One suspect after another was listed. There were already more than 30 people on the other side's list, but I had already rejected all of them. Finally, the silly cat lost all her patience. Just who is it? Me. I don't know. Don't bite me. All right, let me explain. I've been leading the way for the past 2 days, so of course they wouldn't be able to find me. You intentionally avoided the real culprit? Why? Do you think I'm that free? The easiest way to find a necromancer is to have another necromancer look for me. The members of the Death Council definitely practice necromancy, and they have death magic on them. Even though I'm in such a weak state right now, I'll definitely be able to sense it as long as I face them. If I see them, I'll definitely cut them down with my sword. Since they asked me to lead the way, they naturally won't be able to find them. The silly cat suddenly fell silent. After a while, she squeezed out a sentence. Why do I feel like they're destined to be scammed the moment they met you? Are you sure you didn't think that their tips were good, so you wanted to earn more money for drinks? Are you sure you don't have any other methods to find that guy? Roland, why are you sweating? Are you feeling guilty? It's hot. It's autumn now. Chapter 481. With the first glimmer of dawn, the open space in front of the Rhino Bar was already bustling with noise. There were some stones, straw dolls, archery targets, and other simple exercise equipment in the open space. Old Barton wasn't too bad. As long as it was a customer of the Rhino Bar, they could use it for free. Sometimes, when he was bored, he would go on stage and give some pointers. For adventurers who were motivated to improve themselves, it was impossible for them to sleep until dawn before they retired. Life wasn't a game, and those freaks who relied on completing quests and killing monsters to obtain EXP for no reason didn't exist in real life. Well, there was still a bug in the game. For the vast majority of people, the insights gained from battles and life and death were indeed the turning point for a breakthrough. However, if one only relied on the sparks on the battlefield to seek improvement, it would not be enough no matter how many lives one had. Moreover, since it was an epiphany to make a breakthrough, it naturally required sufficient accumulation, and that accumulation naturally required the study and cultivation of the past. Although spellcasters needed enough sleep, it had become a routine to analyze spells every morning when they were in the best state. Most priests had to pray to the gods at dawn, as if they were paying respects to the gods for their divine power. But in this aspect, the priests and judges of the law class were different. Law professionals didn't need to pay respects to Wumians in the morning and report to him at night. They only needed to study and believe in the law itself. In this aspect, they were more like mages who also had intelligence as their main attribute. But although it was troublesome for priests to pray, compared to other professions, it was extremely easy. From the sound of the law reciting in the goblin room on the second floor of the bar, Saul, who became more and more aware of his own shortcomings as he adventured, didn't waste any time. And from the lights that didn't go out until 3 or 4 in the morning, the goblin judges, who had just lost face yesterday, seemed to have a sense of bravery after knowing their shame. However, just like how mages only read book knowledge and studied theories, they wouldn't be able to improve much. Mages needed to use experiments to verify their own theories, and practice to prove their own deductions. Law job classes also needed to apply the law in handling cases and enforcing the law. They needed to turn empty laws into actual cases and use their own actions to fulfill their own understanding of the law. Of course, mages could look through other people's experimental records, and judges could look through case collections. However, looking at information and experiencing it personally were two completely different things. In order to reach the peak, one needed to be able to slowly grind away at a rock, and there was no room for falsehood. Back in Sulphur Mountain City, the strongest individuals of the 4 halls were also judges, handling cases every day. Warriors, knight, saint knight, and other melee professions would have it even harder. They would often need to hone their sword techniques and train their bodies. If they didn't touch their sword for 3 days, they would be rusty. If they didn't touch their sword for a week, they would regress. If they didn't touch their sword for half a year, they would be half crippled. If they wanted to improve step by step, those warriors who practiced their sword techniques every day before the sun rose were the best examples. Of course, if one reached Adam and Marguerite's level, combat techniques and spellcasting would become second nature, and there would be no need to hone their skills every day. But perhaps it was because it had become a habit. Adam and the others never neglected their training. Tens of thousands of sword techniques every day would be enough for an ordinary swordsman to train for a month. Only Roland would sleep until noon. Mary woke up very early, but she only stretched her body and did some sword-swinging practice before returning to her room. After all, as a 4 elemental swordcaster, although there was the word sword in their job title, nobody expected them to be skilled in sword techniques. Their numerous and widely used sword seals were the foundation of their strength. 7 years was the fastest period of growth for a new job class that had started from nothing. Back then, Roland saw the potential of this job, but what he threw out was an incomplete job. Now, countless people had perfected this job that did not have high requirements for both magic and martial arts. Starting from the initial 4 elemental sword seals, there were now more than 30 types of regular sword seals. This new job also had its own direction of advancement, and a large number of regular gold rank advanced jobs were produced. For example, there were those who specialized in the extreme advancement of certain elemental sword seals, and in battle, they were similar to spellcasters. There were also those who specialized in the use of sword seals, and in combination with magic sword techniques similar to magic warriors, they were spirit swordsmen. The former mainly focused on the research of higher-level sword seals. They often carried multiple miniature energy pools, and their magic swords would also have a few more insertion slots for Olivia's magic box and sword seal module. The latter, on the other hand, was proficient in the combination of various sword seals. They often carried multiple magic swords for themselves to use various magic sword techniques. Compared to the traditional spellcaster job, although the spirit swordsman only had a single spell and a smaller attack range, the advantages of faster casting and higher frequency were obvious. But what really made it so popular, apart from the lower requirements for spellcasters, was mainly because it was a gold coin job. Yes, this was a gold coin job that burned more money than mages. As long as you had money and had enough Olivia's magic box and sword seal module, you would be the king of war with endless firepower. As for the spirit swordsmen, their path of growth was even more steady and steady. They specialized in the use of various sword seals, as well as the various powerful magic sword techniques that were created by combining sword seals. Perhaps the effects would be slower in the short term, but in the eyes of the truly strong, their evaluation would be much higher than that of the spirit swordsman. And the strongest spirit swordsman, Cohen, was said to have already stepped into the myth rank. He even had the battle record of not being defeated by a semigod, and was viewed as the most accomplished member of the younger generation on the continent. By the way, when Roland saw this news, he had extremely complex feelings. Apart from, my disciple has finally surpassed me on this path, I'm very gratified. Apart from that, there were even more thoughts like, how did he surpass me so quickly? How am I supposed to put on airs in front of him in the future? Getting back to the main topic, the most obvious advantage of the 4 elemental swordcasters being ahead of the times, and the reason why they were quickly accepted by the various countries and the people of the world, was their excellent compatibility with the magic machinery of the new era. Every swordcaster carried various small tools on them, and as long as they inserted their magic swords into the magic machinery, they would be able to control the machinery as if they were controlling their own arms. This was something that a pilot with natural training would never be able to compare to. Because of this, among the 4 elemental swordcasters, there were also those who used their magic swords as controllers to control all sorts of magic machinery. However, since large-scale battle machinery was expensive and often used for the military of a certain country, there were still very few professional pilots. They would often choose to use specially made magic swords and work for the military. It could be said that the strength of a 4 elemental swordcaster had nothing to do with their physical body, but rather how many sword seals they had mastered, how many magic sword techniques they had learned, whether they had enough sword seal modules and Olivia's magic box, and whether they had brought all sorts of new battle machinery with them. Mary had already stepped into the gold rank, but just by looking at the magic swords with 3 sockets, one could tell that she was a spirit swordsman who mainly used high-level sword seals as her main combat strength. All the equipment on her body was expendable. Under the premise that the enemy's current situation was unknown, actual combat training was actually a kind of meaningless preemptive consumption of combat strength, and could easily expose one's trump card. Tiana also woke up very early, and started practicing her swordsmanship before the sky had even brightened. As an anti-knight, they had lost almost all of their supernatural abilities. The only thing they could rely on was their firm willpower and the sharp sword in their hand. For an anti-knight, willpower could be turned into protective armor, could be turned into a sharp blade for attack, but it could only turn the opponent into a mortal like themselves. In the end, the victory still depended on the sword techniques in their hands. In a sense, this was a difficult profession that only martial arts experts had the confidence to advance into. Of course, if your martial arts were too lousy, you could put on heavy armor and compete with your opponent in a battle of attrition, but it would be hard to say who would win. Most of your painstaking training would be wasted from the beginning. But obviously, Tiana was the former. She was an expert swordsman, and an extremely outstanding would-be sword saint. As she swung her silver-white long sword, pitch-black clouds and mist appeared. The blood patterns on the blade vaguely flowed, and the standard enchanted mithril heavy sword whistled in the wind like a magic sword. This wasn't because they had fallen into darkness, but because the anti-knight carried the special effect of the god's loathing curse. All their weapons and armor would gradually be dyed black, which represented depravity. When Tiana swung her sword, there was still some black mist surrounding the silver armor. But due to the armor's special design, The black mist wrapped around the key parts like floating clouds, making the armor appear faintly discernible, adding a mysterious, elegant, and bizarre sense of beauty. The curse seemed to have become another kind of decoration. I didn't expect it to have such an effect. Is this the reason why they chose this armor? Sure enough, these elves love beauty to the bone. Tiana didn't choose the elves' favorite rapier and scimitar, because those two obviously lacked strength and weren't suitable for the heavily armored knight class. The heavy sword vibrated like rolling thunder, and a faint sword aura enveloped the blade. The black sword aura faintly reverberated on the heavy sword. This was the sign of a would-be sword saint who had mastered aura. When she could release sword aura as she pleased, that would be the day she truly became a sword saint. Seeing this scene, my first reaction was, so that girl isn't as young as I thought. Elves matured extremely slowly. Qualified true warrior would need 200 years. Judging from past experience, a would-be sword saint like her wouldn't be able to advance without several hundred years, unless she was a super genius. And if she was a veteran warrior with several hundred years of experience, then her experience wouldn't be too bad. And perhaps the reason why they dared to accept this mission was because they had such an expert following them. In a sense, the anti-knight and the 4 elemental swordcasters were two extremes. One reached its limit without external help, while the other was completely useless without external help. Over the past few years, through actual combat, these two classes were the best partners on the battlefield. One had many abilities, but they weren't stable. Since low-level sword seals had limited instantaneous explosive power, they were the worst at dealing with powerful individuals. The other didn't fear any duel, and specialized in difficult attacks, but lacked support abilities. This formed a natural complement of abilities. But because the number of 4 elemental swordcasters kept increasing, the anti-knight's advancement requirements were too high. Even the lowest rank had to be a gold job, and they had to be skilled in martial arts. This combination had unwittingly become a monopoly of the northern powers. Of course, this also had a lot to do with the strongest anti-knight and the leader of all the anti-knight, Diana. If that Mary is about the same level, then I probably won't have to worry about being killed by those little fellows from the Death Council. At this moment, I was lying under a tree, reading a newspaper while thinking about how to tell them about my latest discovery without leaving a trace. Yep, I definitely wasn't sipping tea while looking at beautiful women. I was doing something serious. That's right, I went to investigate last night and discovered something. Although I wasn't a member of the Death Council, it could be said that I was on their tail. As long as I followed the clues, I might be able to dig out a large group of them. How do I unknowingly let them break the ritual? I can't even expose myself. So it's so difficult to be a good NPC. What a headache. Devils and demons are fighting again? This year's 4th conflict between a devil lord and a demon lord? That's a rare piece of good news. The newspaper headlines were about a new round of fighting in the Chaos Abyss. A certain demon lord was torn to shreds, and a certain devil lord successfully advanced in rank in the midst of battle. Right now, the most chaotic part of all the planes in He wasn't the mortal plane, but the lower planes. The disappearance of the will of the Chaos Abyss directly caused the entire Chaos Abyss to go completely out of control. The devils and demons, who already had many conflicts with each other, were now fighting each other. As for whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, nobody could say. They're even able to gather information about the lower planes so quickly. It seems that I underestimated the fairies in the past. Perhaps I should consider cooperating with them. It was worth mentioning that as the Holy War progressed and the fairies paid no heed to the costs, He's already well-developed newspaper industry became even more prosperous. Using griffins to deliver the latest weekly magazines seemed far too extravagant in the past. Just as the content of the newspaper, which was supposed to be a cover, truly attracted my attention, Diana suddenly walked over and smiled at me. "Caro, have you learned anything after reading for so long? Do you have time to practice swordsmanship with me? I paused for a moment, and then, judging from my embarrassed and angry expression, it seemed that I had accidentally offended her. But as a wily old fox, how could I possibly admit defeat so easily? Of course, my lady. As long as you're willing to treat me to a week's worth of ale as payment. However, I've already pawned all my weapons and equipment for ale, so you can help me buy a set of chain mail and a longsword. Right, if you accidentally injure me, can I apply for medical fees and mental compensation?